former merchandiser, deeply disappointed in people, often stood lost in thought and wondered how contradictory people could be. When left alone, he was suddenly overwhelmed by a strong desire to disappear from this world, to turn off his phone, delete all accounts, simply dissolve. But each time, succumbing to his sad thoughts, he returned to ordinary life and could never understand why these feelings tormented him so much. For many years, people, their words and actions had taught him to be cautious, as if he lived in shackles with no way out, but suddenly he won the lottery, and this gave him a chance to break out of that circle. He quit his job, moved to a quiet town in Hokkaido, and took up farming, and then it seemed to him that this was the only right choice, suggested by time itself. He swore loudly when he realized he had entered some other world, as if into a game. Unfamiliar landscapes, strange architecture, and bizarre creatures around confused him even more, and sharply turning around, he shouted, "What is this place?" He sighed with relief and decided that for now this was enough. Stretching upward as if yawning, he said, "Freedom is wonderful." His thoughts again returned to this strange world. Everything here was unusual and strange, but at the same time interesting. At first he was scared when he found himself here, but quickly decided he would somehow manage. Fortunately, during that commotion, he was also transported along with the chicken coop and the tool shed. The chicken's eggs could be eaten, and the tools were perfect for gathering wild edible plants. So he realized that he would not have to starve anytime soon. If we are talking about another world, then of course there was magic and superpowers. He tried various spells and gestures, holding hope in his heart that something would happen, and suddenly he tasted a fruit, and information flashed before his eyes. Instantly, it was durian. He realized that his ability really worked but had limitations. It could analyze in detail only what he was about to eat, so thinking about cooking this fruit with the magical virgin herb, he became interested in whether something useful would come out of it. Seeing a monster, he stepped back and immediately began luring it into a pre-prepared trap. He shouted loudly to attract the creature and make it follow him, and as soon as the monster was in the trap, the hero joyfully exclaimed that everything had worked out. The hero was glad that the trap worked, opened his character menu, and saw that he had leveled up from 2 to 3. When he first leveled up from 1 to 2, he was very scared seeing the status window, but now it no longer surprised him yet. Looking at his new level, he was a little disappointed because the third level seemed too weak to him. And he defeated monsters, he could evaluate them. A note appeared in the status window, an inhuman creature found throughout Lancaster. The hero wondered, maybe it was a goblin, or maybe that was the name of the whole area. Examining the loot, he decided to take only equipment, but he knew well he needed to take all useful things because survival depended on it. The hero approached his workplace and immediately began using the collected stones and healing herbs. First, he took a fire stone that breathed flame and a femtostone suitable for grinding, crushed both and mixed well, obtaining an abrasive mixture with flame, and if he polished the goblin dagger with this mixture, it became a flaming dagger. Suddenly he realized, new properties could be added to weapons from special materials, so he should collect as many useful resources as possible. Next, he decided to take up herbs. He had healing herbs from Irene, the magical herb of the Virgin, and also a recently found fruit of the potato weed. Irene's herbs restored strength and were used to prepare potions. The petals of the magical herb of the Virgin contained substances that restored magical power and energy. The hero carefully strained the obtained infusion and was pleased to note that the potion was successful. It wonderfully restored strength, healed moderate wounds, and returned magical energy, but he understood that ordinary healing herbs worked too slowly and required a lot, which was inconvenient, so he became interested in another idea. Try making a potion from poisonous herbs, bujir and gadel. If transformed into a potion, it would absorb faster and start working almost immediately, and bujir drains strength, gadel clouds the mind and causes hallucinations, and this could produce very interesting effects. The hero wondered whether it was worth testing the potion's effect, decided that he could try mixing it with an antidote, made up his mind, drank the potion and immediately ate marlin herb, which neutralizes the poisons of gadel and bujir plants and weakens other weaker poisons, but his body could not withstand such a load. He fell to the ground, and sitting and regaining consciousness, bitterly thought that if someone was watching now, they would definitely consider him a real fool. He realized that the potion was actually a very strong poison and decided to coat arrow tips with it. Then a thought struck him. What if those herbs dug up with roots could be planted in ordinary soil and grown? And another spark of insight, this is not just poison, but a real lure. The hero noticed changes and said that the chicken's wings became shinier after he gave them some herbs. Curiously touched one chicken and activated evaluation. It quickly turned out that the chicken had transformed into a grass chicken, and its meat now had nutritious properties, restored strength, and even removed toxins. Impressed by such a change, he could not believe his eyes and immediately thought, what if tonic herbs were combined with healing ones? The hero thought with relief that it was good he had already cut up the carcasses and thrown the meat on the fire, generously adding healing herbs. When the first piece was in his mouth, he could not contain his delight and exclaimed what a delicacy it was. Savoring each piece of fried chicken, he said that the chicken's life was not in vain. Having buried the remains of the chicken in a small improvised grave, the hero noted with slight sadness that a part of this life would remain here, then took a deep breath, gathered his thoughts, and reminded himself that he needed to go to the city and sell everything he had made. He understood that many things, like an ordinary Japanese man, he could not create himself, so he needed to earn money to buy them. Estimating the upcoming journey, the hero determined that the round trip would take 3 hours, a considerable distance, but this did not stop him, and he was full of determination to reach the city. He sighed heavily and, barely moving his legs, said tiredly that he was not used to walking so much his legs felt like wood. Seeing an old man with a horse, he wondered if it was possible to buy a horse in the city. Reaching the city gates, the hero approached the guard and confidently said that he was a merchant. The guard replied something, but the hero just blinked. He still did not understand anything. He showed the guard his potions and herbs, made it clear that he was a trader, and was calmly let through without even being asked anything. He did not yet know the local language, but did not see much need for it. Knowing sell, buy, thank you, a few greetings and numbers would be enough for trading, so with a confident mood he set off into the very heart of the city. In this city there was a so-called adventurers guild, where the hero ended up quite by accident. Inside there was a notice board and next to it a cashier where one could learn all about rewards and achievements, and upon entering, he immediately went to the board and began carefully examining the tasks posted there. The main hero mostly caught longtooth sea bass, so he faced a choice, to give up or find allies and fight together, and he did not understand the local language at all, which complicated matters even more. When he left the Adventurers Guild, he suddenly heard someone calling him. 2 people approached him, a small trader and Margot, a seller of weapons and armor. Such people were always watched in the city, so the hero greeted them, pulled out a fire dagger and showed it. The weapons dealer immediately came alive, his eyes widened. He loudly said he would buy this dagger, and the hero immediately understood. Weapons with unique properties were highly valued here. The hero decided to sell the fire dagger to Margot, because of which the merchant's wife got angry at him. A look of hostility appeared in her eyes, but this did not bother him at all, since he could make more such daggers. Margot wanted to say something, and the hero, grasping the gist of the conversation, understood that he was being asked if he wanted to move to the city, and he answered clearly he refused, not wishing to change his solitary life. And then thoughts of giving up everything, as in a past life, surfaced in him again. He never knew when this desire would appear. He got along poorly with people, and even moving did not change anything. But now he had so many gold coins that he could buy himself a horse, and he tried to convey this by writing with chalk on a small board. It seemed the local language here was called Lancaster. If you use the skill assessment on a Japanese sentence, it will be displayed in Lancasterian. The translation took a bit longer, but at least they managed to communicate in writing. The trader Sarasa showed willingness to help with buying a horse, and the hero decided to trust her. She went somewhere, leaving him a bit surprised, but he chose to wait, thinking it would be better that way. Lady Sarasa suddenly turned around, leading the horse, which greatly surprised the hero. He gave her the gold coins, took the horse, and rejoiced that returning home would be much easier. When all business in the city was finished, the hero said goodbye to the merchant Margot and Lady Sarasa and set off back. Margot and Sarasa had been following the hero from the very beginning, even to his land, and he did not like it very much. When he bought the horse, a stable appeared right there with it, because the girls instantly built it, and they even offered to build a smithy for him, which completely confused him. The hero thanked them and seemed frozen, trying to understand what was happening. He refused city life, fearing the same sudden desires that had haunted him before. Closing himself off, he did not notice how he distanced himself from other people, yet Margot and Sarasa cautiously approached him, as if not wanting to leave him alone. Here everything had long ceased to be just business relations. He felt something more but could not or did not want to realize it. However, he did not seek to create unnecessary ties, which, in his opinion, would be superfluous. He even began to have some plans and concerns, but he would definitely have time to truly thank these 2 later. Construction was completed, and the hero finally became a farmer merchant, and his new horse Ronan also appreciated the stable and leisurely got acquainted with his new home. According to the project of Margot and Sarasa, traders from Lancaster, a smithy and a stable grew on his farm, as well as a chicken coop and a tool shed. The hero was glad. There was enough space for all things, and he imagined how now he would calmly forge and prepare elixirs without fear of monster attacks. To check this, he began brewing a decoction, carefully boiling the magical herb virgin and the healing herb marin. The heroes watched his work with interest and noticed. He managed to create a new potion, magical restoration, with a medium-level poison neutralization effect, although in a small quantity. He thought to divide it, keep one part for himself, put the other up for sale, and looking around the smithy, the hero felt that he could not just stockpile but seriously engage in production. His blacksmith skills were excellent, but he hesitated whether to expand the manufacture of weapons with special properties, so before making important decisions, he decided to think about how to thank Margot and Sarasa. The hero was turning over in his mind how to thank Margot and Sarasa. He had no idea what exactly to do for them. Maybe treat them to something tasty or arrange a dinner. He even had salt, maybe share it. Remembering the shops in Ristas City, he recalled that they mostly traded long-lasting products like dried meat or hard bread, while fresh gifts would definitely please everyone more. He thought to use leafy plants as spices and divide the meat among the three, and if adding chicken for a full dinner at least 2 were needed. But the more chicken they ate, the fewer eggs would remain, and they were not only nutritious but also restored strength and even cleansed the body. Although the hero was a farmer and not particularly fond of hunting, he sometimes thought about catching some game, at least a rabbit. After calculating that he could manage, he noticed that one of his traps had worked, quickly ran to check, and found that it was not an ordinary beast but a real monster resembling a wolf. This was very timely. Having leveled up, the hero wondered, isn't it cheating to raise the level this way? At first, he activated the appraisal skill and saw that before him was a wolf monster found throughout Lancaster. He thought this creature could make good food. The hero survived only thanks to the guild's masterful disassembly, lacked experience in processing a wolf, so now he just had to wait. To avoid boredom, he approached the notice board and browsed quests, and among them one interesting announcement caught his eye. Chicken Noit was a taming task, but who is this cockatrice? Peacekeeping mission did not concern him at all, but suddenly the administrator of the Adventurers Guild named Dan approached the hero, understood almost nothing of his words, hearing only one name, Kai. What could it mean? To follow him or not? The hero used the skill assessment and realized that this was a dojo. The trainer turned out to be Kai, who greeted him as Keigo, and Okuda felt that something important might happen here after the greeting. He wondered if he could learn combat skills here, as he had long wanted to master self-defense techniques. At first, the hero decided to thank and quickly sincerely said to Kai, "Thank you." Watching how the dojo master broke the mannequin with one strike, he tried to imagine how strong that strike was. Leader Kai extended the wooden sword, showing that the hero could try. The hero took the weapon, assumed a fighting stance, and the sword in his hands suddenly lit up, after which he struck the mannequin. The hero just acquired a new skill, strike. Thanking Kai, he noticed a sign on the way out of the dojo and decided to translate the inscription. It stated that due to the large number of adventurers killed by monster attacks, the martial arts master Kai teaches beginners combat techniques for free. The hero was struck by the power of Master Kai's blow and realized that such techniques could truly come in handy if well practiced. He sincerely thanked fate for the fact that visiting the dojo had opened him the opportunity to acquire skills not only for evaluating items, and having gathered ingredients for food to thank Margot and Sarasa, he set off home. On the way home, the hero noticed a stone statue of a goblin, and then his gaze froze on a cockatrice. Realizing that it could be dangerous, he signaled the horse to go faster. Bursting into the shed, he hugged the hen to himself, sat by the door, and trembling with fear began to sob. When he heard a knock, he flinched, then thought, what if it's a person? With fear, the hero opened the door and, seeing a pile of Sarahs before him, tightly pressed her to himself. Unable to hold back tears from relief, he cried even harder. When the merchant's wife heard his sobbing, she couldn't bear it and asked again if he was afraid of something. He cried and couldn't calm down until he noticed Margot and another man nearby whom he didn't know, and gradually he calmed down. He felt embarrassed, really didn't want to look so pitiful in front of a person he was seeing for the first time. Margot remembered the basilisk, and the hero immediately recalled the task. He wondered if Margot, Sarasa, and that stranger who looked like an adventurer would go to tame this creature, but gradually calming down, he decided to simply trust them. The hero did not understand what was happening around, but felt that he could help. He prepared and handed over weapons and medicines that he had gathered in advance. Having handed over everything necessary, the hero watched as Sarissa showed a drawing with a plan on how to calm the basilisk and explained what they would do next. The hero asked in surprise if they really wanted him to shoot a bow, because he could not understand why exactly he was dragged into all this fuss. With taming the cockatrice not long ago, he worked in a trading company in another world, and in this world, which in his opinion resembled a game, risking life was completely illogical, even if asked to do so. Margot, Sarasa, and the unknown traveler tried to encourage Keigo so that he would find faith in himself. They insisted that it would be safer together and assured they would not let the cockatrice hurt him. Keigo felt that if he gave in to fear and did nothing, nothing would change. He also realized that surviving alone was almost impossible, so he began preparing for a fight with the cockatrice, hoping very much to return home alive. Seeing the basilisk, the hero was amazed how huge it was. For a moment he even envied Sarasa a little, who stayed home to keep order. having made sure that Margot and the adventurer were in their places, he focused on the approaching battle. The hero aimed with the bow and released a poisoned arrow. It hit the cockatrice, and this became a signal for the allies to start the offensive and go on the attack. After the victory over the basilisk, the hero felt that his allies probably had a level higher than his own, and at that moment the monster noticed him, began preparing an attack, and he realized that he would not have time to dodge the blow. The adventurer rushed forward and pushed the hero at the last moment, and thanks to this, they managed to partially avoid the cockatrice's attack. After the basilisk's attack, the hero felt his body gradually turning to stone. At the same moment, Margot, covering the adventurer in kikaku, loudly reminded about the antidote potion, and realizing that immediate action was needed, the hero pulled out the vial, gave it to the adventurer, and hurriedly drank his own. Margot pressed the cockatrice's snout to the ground, and the hero instantly understood. Without a double counterattack, they would not cope. Strength was barely left, but there was still a chance. If they attacked simultaneously with the adventurer and used the strike skill, they could win, so gathering all his courage he grabbed the weapon, calmed down, concentrated, and together with his companions struck simultaneously, putting all his strength into the attack. After the joint attack, their strike hit the target exactly. Cockatrice screamed loudly for the last time and fell, completely exhausted. The hero and the adventurer, breathing heavily, realized the battle was over, and Cockatrice was finally defeated. Jigo Akuta was promoted to a higher level, and he was stunned. He couldn't believe that their squad had really defeated the Cockatrices. As the truth began to sink in, another adventurer approached him and introduced himself. Jigo didn't understand everything from the conversation, but the name Juno was definitely remembered. Coming to his senses, he sincerely thanked both Juno and Margot for their help in the fight. The hero pondered. Although the allies were weak individually, together they managed to win. He realized that one of the arrows, possibly even his own, was actually more fragile than it seemed at first. Maybe this time he was just lucky. But more than anything, he was troubled not by these thoughts, but by secret urges inside that pushed him to end everything once and for all. In honor of the victory over the strongest basilisk, a small celebration was held, and Keigo, as a sign of gratitude, treated Margot, Sarasa, and Juno. This time he seasoned the meat with garlic and salt, although it was tasty even without spices, and invited everyone to eat as much as they wanted and not to rush anywhere, enjoying the dinner. He believed that delicious food could convey various emotions, so he brought more drinks to maintain a pleasant, festive atmosphere, and deep in his soul, sincerely thanked Juno for helping to tame the Cockatrice and Sarasa, with Margot for the stable and forge, which became a great support for him. During dinner, they suddenly noticed that blue wolves were sneaking up to the camp. The hero counted 3 predators and decided that they were attracted by the smell of freshly cooked food. The hero thought with surprise that the appearance of such powerful monsters, because of the smell of food, was quite unexpected, and emphasized that if these creatures did not behave aggressively, there was no point in attacking them. Keigo's companions understood his intention and indifferently ignored the blue wolves, simply continuing to eat. The hero noticed how Sarasa looked at him cheerfully and mentally asked her not to laugh so loudly, deciding to keep his distance and not make unnecessary enemies. After all the hardships he had endured, he did not want to become someone's easy prey again in this world. The main thing was not just to defeat enemies, but to be able to survive, so he tried to avoid any risks. Sending his comrades back to the city, the hero began cleaning up after the meal. He confidently knew that he had thanked Margot, Sarasa, and Juno and trained a little, and looking at the field where the blue wolves had recently been, he decided to prepare in case they approached his territory. He dug pits and turned them into a nest trap, carefully placed bunches of poisonous herbs on top, and hid, waiting for the blue wolves to return. Keigo decided to set up a rope alarm around his house, himself to hear, in advance, if the blue wolves suddenly wanted to visit him. He went to set a tiger trap from the guild and placed it, and when the traps were ready, he felt relief. Now the chances of surviving and being safe had increased. Although Keigo lived on the outskirts, he decided to put up a warning sign, let everyone know that someone lives here and could be dangerous. He had already done everything needed on the street, only the tools remained to be put away, and although he thought about fixing the hut, he first decided to make a shield. Keigo sighed with relief, comparing the finished cleaning to any boring task. Once you start, it's hard to stop. He noticed that the boards had completely disappeared, but was not surprised, because today he had crafted many different things from them. His little house was small, more like a chicken coop, but now it was his own home, which he made with his own hands. Finally, dinner was brought, and Keigo prepared a steak from the meat of a blue wolf, seasoned with Irino's healing herbs and a pinch of salt. For this dish, he chose a Milanese fruit liqueur, which went perfectly with the meat, and although the dinner resembled lunch, it still tasted exceptionally delicious. When the siren sounded, Kiko wondered if the same wolves he had seen during the day had appeared here. Frightened, he grabbed his weapon and cautiously stepped out of the hut, hoping that it was just people who needed something, and not those predators he had seen earlier. Kigo stepped out of the hut and saw that a blue wolf had been caught in one of the traps. Hope faded these were not people, and realizing that he first needed to deal with this wolf, Kigo drew his bow and shot an arrow straight at the struggling animal in the trap. There were still 2 wolves left, so Kiko carefully looked around and was surprised not to see other pack members nearby. This made him wary. Wolves could not just disappear, so he stared into the darkness, catching the slightest movement, because he felt that predators might be lurking nearby and preparing to attack. Suddenly, wolves rushed at him from both sides. Kano barely managed to react. His heart beat faster, his whole body tensed, ready to defend. He understood, if he did not handle this attack, he could be in real trouble. The hero, with one sharp movement, stabbed a sword into one wolf, and with the other hand pushed the second wolf straight into the trap with his shield. Pulling the sword out of the fallen wolf, the hero felt adrenaline fill him. There was no fear left, although everything around was still scary. Now only one wolf remained. The hero loudly called for an attack, activated the skill strike, and with one strong blow knocked down the last blue wolf. Keigo, feeling his level rise after the victory over the wolves, collapsed onto the grass and froze. Looking at the sky, death was so close it was chilling. He even thought about writing a death note. Seriously, no matter what power you have in this world, it is never enough. A rustle made Keigo instantly jump up. He tensed and prepared for battle, but at that moment noticed something that immediately caught his attention. A small puppy, which was with the others, saw the body of its mother and was sad for a moment, but as soon as it noticed the hero, it instantly cheered up and began to run joyfully around him, as if nothing had happened. The hero realized that the wolves would kill him. The attack was inevitable, but only one wolf cub remained from the whole pack, which he held in his arms. Looking into the puppy's eyes, the hero understood that he could not kill it. Paying tribute to the fallen she-wolf, he took on the care of the little one, and then, exhausted, returned to the hut. Tired and with a heavy heart, he lay down, tightly hugged the puppy, and quickly fell asleep. Sarasa noticed the puppy and immediately rushed to hug it. The hero warned right away that the wolf cub was not for sale. Apparently, the little one pleased her very much. Skinning 3 wolves turned out to be difficult, so he asked Sarasa and Juno for help and used the appraisal skill on the fang of the blue wolf to find out that it could be used to improve weapons. He sold everything that was left from the wolves. Although they wanted to eat him, he still managed to get money for it. Waking up, he used the skill to appraise the puppy, and it turned out to be a rare species of ash-colored wolves with fur that looked nothing like ordinary. The hero believed that if the wolf cub grew up among people, there was a chance it would not attack them, but he understood well. If the beast, once grown, harmed people, he would have to answer for it, possibly even kill his own wolf cub. He was afraid that, learning how his parents died, a thirst for revenge would awaken in it, because the laws of this world are cruel. The strong eat the weak. But still, the hero decided to do everything to raise the wolf cub differently. The hero decided to sew himself a cloak from the fur of an ash wolf. This color enchanted him, and he believed that the puppy would recognize him by the smell as its own. Sending his companions back to the city, he stayed alone with the puppy and began to think about what to name it. The hero gave him the name Ash. This puppy became the first living creature that he in this new, strange world could call his family, and this thought fell on him like a heavy burden. A new page of life, new trials, new responsibility, and Kigo felt that a difficult path awaited ahead. The hero sharply called the puppy, trying to stop it. Ash rushed to grab a chicken and had already managed to ruin the seedlings. Since then, he had no time for sadness. He promised Ash's parents that he would take responsibility for his upbringing. Ash got all dirty in the mud again today. The hero sighed heavily, looked at the puppy, and thought that if this continued, the water would soon run out. Then he remembered that Margot had left some ingots and decided to see what could be made from them, and after several attempts, he managed to give them at least some shape. All this had to be crafted for a long time, but finally everything was ready. The bath was already heated, and the hero felt relieved that he could finally bathe in warm water. Since the time he got into this world, he had only been wiping himself with cold water, and now, thanks to the new water supply system, it was possible to draw more water, and inspired, he exclaimed. The hero was pleased that it was spacious and quiet here. The air seemed incredibly fresh. In the city he usually bought water, but here it was much easier to draw it from the lake, and looking around, he noticed some eccentric monsters nearby that he had not seen before, but since they were not showing aggression yet, there was nothing to worry about. The hero turned to the puppy and happily said that they would soon get water, but Ash suddenly tensed, and Keigo also felt danger. A sudden strike made him instinctively raise his shield, but the force of the attack was so great that he fell into the barrels, cursing everything and trying to quickly recover. The hero immediately understood that he was dealing with a water monster, and while he was coming to his senses, Ash rushed forward and bit the monster on the back, and Keigo, without wasting a second, drew his bow and shot a poisoned arrow straight into the monster's knee. The monster was distracted when the arrow hit its knee, and Keigo instantly took advantage of this, with a swift sword strike cutting off its head. Immediately after the victory, he was filled with a wave of energy. His level rose again, but despite the ease of victory, Keigo understood well. This was only possible thanks to Ash. Using his ability to evaluate, Keigo learned that the fallen monster was Murnum, a water creature with water magic, and wondered if the strike that hit it was actually a water spell. If not for Ash's warning, he probably would not be standing here anymore, and meanwhile Ash ran up to Keigo with something in his teeth, and upon examining the find, Keigo recognized Murnum's scale, saturated with the power of the water element, and suitable as a material for sorcery and transferring water magic. Praising Ash for his agility and help in battle, Keigo decided that this puppy was no longer just a favorite, but a true partner. Cage, playing a symphony for Ash, noticed how the puppy froze and listened to the melody with pleasure, and seeing this, he played on, rejoicing that his music brought warmth even in this new world. Later, during bathing, he played a little more with Ash in the bath. This moment seemed especially warm to him because despite all the difficulties, it was these simple joys that gave strength to overcome them. Keigo knew he had to become stronger to protect Ash, but he was worried whether the puppy got enough nourishment from the herbs and eggs he gave. Ash was very cute, but still a wolf, and simply buying food for him was not enough to raise a true predator, so Keigo often went to the city for dried meat. Each such trip was risky and hard, and in this new world, even ordinary tasks became a trial. Keigo decided to avoid unnecessary fights. Today he was convinced that monsters with magic lived in this world, and mere defense against them was not enough. He needed to figure out how to attack them effectively. He wondered whether to find a stronger weapon to counter such threats, but these thoughts exhausted him, so probably it was better not to think about it for now. When no one is around, you can only rely on yourself. Keigo perceived meeting Ash as fate and really wanted to believe in it. Deep down, he was sure that he could protect the puppy and live peacefully despite all the difficulties of this world. Now they could take hot baths whenever they wanted, but Keiko still felt anxiety. She sighed nothing would change until everything dried. She looked at the clothes bought in the city, and every time she put them on, she felt acutely she was in another world. Nerves did not let her concentrate, but at least they managed to get water. Now only remained. Keijiko decided to make a weapon, and threw himself into work with great inspiration, although he felt it would not be easy. In recent days, he had been training in the forge on metal scraps, and now he wanted to successfully repeat everything a few more times to be confident in his hands before taking on the ash and wolf fangs, a rare material that Juno had obtained for him. When he began melting and using iron ingots, Keijiko noticed that they were much more expensive than the metal fragments he had worked with before. Finishing the work, Keigo exhaled with relief and proudly looked at his creation, wanted to show the sword to Ash, but he was fascinated by chasing a butterfly and did not even pay attention. Keigo smiled, began to improve the handle, and using the evaluation skill, learned that his weapon was called Wolverine Sword, a blade made of strong, valuable steel, reinforced with the fang of an ashen wolf, and assessing the result, he thought that the name really sounded impressive. Keigo was confident, with such a weapon he could definitely protect Ash. Then he remembered the scales of Murnum and the fire stone which he had recently found, decided that they could also be used, and began to think about how to do it, carefully crushing the scales and the stone, mixing the resulting powder and hoping it would not explode. When nothing happened, he breathed a sigh of relief, but the hardest part was ahead. He had to try the mixture for taste to activate the evaluation. As soon as Keigo tasted the powder, his tongue trembled. He exclaimed in surprise, and activating his analysis ability, finally understood what he was dealing with. It was the powder of the fearsome thunder, which gave the weapon lightning power, and realizing that the combination of fire and water really caused an electric discharge, he immediately decided to test it on the Wolverine sword, carefully rubbing the blade with the new substance, and using the analysis again to check the result. The hero carefully examined the result of his work. The Thunder Wolverine sword was forged from solid, strong iron, reinforced with the fang of an ash she-wolf, and charged with lightning energy, and looking at it, he felt pride as if he had truly created something incredible. All that remained was to wrap the handle with insulation so that the sword could be safely held with bare hands, and after completing all preparations, the hero looked at the weapon with satisfaction and turning to Yason, said that the new weapon was finally ready, but glancing at the wolf cub, he saw that he was already sound asleep, not waiting for the work to finish. The hero thought about magic, but quickly realized. First, he needed to strengthen his defense and hone his shooting skills. Experienced mentors helped him with this, because he decided to protect Esha as a father and partner, and had to constantly become better at defending. Relying only on shooting was dangerous. Poison could run out, so he began training with Master Kai to master the basics of effective defense in battle. The hero asked if he could keep the bow, and upon receiving permission, thanked him. Kai drew the bowstring, aimed at the mannequin, and released an arrow that glowed before flight. Keigo held his breath in amazement. Seeing how strong his teacher was, he knew Kai was talented, but did not expect such mastery. When Kai called him and offered to try the technique, Kay answered, yes, focused and tried to repeat the teacher's movements as precisely as possible. Gathering all his attention, he activated the ability and loudly shouted the command. The system reported that he had acquired the charged arrow skill. The shot was successful, but Keigo felt that mastering this technique perfectly would require long training. Kai addressed Kaga and said it was time to train defense, reminding him that this required not only strength but also the courage to face the opponent. Kaga understood that this was important for development and was ready to accept the challenge, rushing forward without hesitation, but the blow was much more powerful than he expected. His attack hit Kai's defense, and Keiko was impressed. It seemed he was as strong as steel. Inspired by this, Kaga prepared for a counterattack and activated his fortitude ability to test how much his own defense would withstand next time. After the blow, Kigo could not stay on his feet and fell on his back, but even through the pain he suddenly felt that he had understood something new. He had mastered the endurance skill. Now all that remained was to continue training to become even better, and thanking the teacher, Kigo set off shopping with new confidence, deciding that now he would definitely succeed. Kiko felt that today he had learned many new things, but with each minute fatigue was increasingly overwhelming him. He knew that if he wanted to become stronger, he needed to train even more, and at that moment Sarasa called him and handed him the cloak. He had ordered. Her work, as always, was impeccable, and the quality was top-notch, thought Kiko, looking at Ash. Why was this cloak so important to the wolf cub? He realized. The cloak reminded him of his parents, so it needed to be protected, and thanking Sarasa, Kiko decided to take good care of the cloak. Sarasa noticed that Kigo's shield was already quite worn out, so without hesitation she handed him a new one, and Kigo himself, inspecting his equipment, with a bitter smile, realized that the old shield was no longer reliable, and no wonder, since he had once made it from an ordinary barrel lid. So Kigo decided to buy another new shield from Sarasa, and at the same time took the cloak he had ordered earlier. Kagome noticed how tenderly Sarasa held Esh, and involuntarily thought how good it would be for him to be in her arms. At that moment he caught himself thinking that he was even a little jealous of his own wolf cub, but as if sensing the master's mood, Esh immediately jumped out of Sarasa's arms and ran to Kagome. He smiled, tightly hugged the puppy to himself, and together they set off home. Keigo put on the cloak again and felt, well, really cool. It had a convenient pocket inside for a flask, and he remembered a bit of Mornam scale dust. He wondered whether to add another element to the armor, conducted a small experiment, completed the enchantment, and saw the fabric glow with a soft light, checked the result with the recognition skill, and made sure everything succeeded. Ashen wolf cloak, fire resistance, because the water element enchantment now made the cloak a protection against fire. Enchanting the armor with the water element, Keigo felt that the fire no longer damaged his armor as much. He understood it was better to have at least some advantage than to be completely defenseless, so after thinking, he decided to enchant the shield as well, which opened new possibilities before him. Looking at Ash, Keigo firmly decided that he would definitely protect him, because so much had happened in the last few days, and he realized, without a partner, he was still too weak. During shooting training, Keigo felt that it had already become his habit. Suddenly Ash started making noise and distracted him, and turning around, he saw a group of people in strange clothing. Keigo immediately noticed Margot and Juno among the crowd. They were clearly dissatisfied, and this made him wary. Looking at the man on the horse leading the group, he instantly realized. Before him was an aristocrat in the company of adventurers, but he still could not understand why such a person needed him specifically. Keigo, realizing his guilt, felt a strange relief his loved ones remained unharmed. Bowing before the grave, he quietly spoke a few words, laid a flower, and bowing his head, immersed himself in prayer. Not long ago, Keigo distrustfully asked him again if they would go together to the forest dungeon, but he immediately waved it off, emphasizing that he was just an ordinary villager near the city and was not going to risk his life, saying, after all, wouldn't an aristocrat with such a number of soldiers handle a few monsters on his own? Margot only smiled and squeezed his face, making it clear that he did not like the idea, but still he could not refuse. Keigo realized that he would probably have to supply the team with potions. From the conversation, he remembered the nobleman's name Baron. He wondered if the monsters in the dungeon were really stronger than usual, and whether he could be of any useful help in this expedition. Usually he did not go far into the forest, but since he had to this time, he decided to gather more herbs for his research, but very quickly he noticed something strange. Everything seemed unnatural, like a setup or a scene from a movie, and Keigo even began to wonder if it reminded him of some film. Dog-like monsters used magic, wounded and killed several mercenaries. All this seemed unreal, while the nobleman with his retinue remained in a safe place and only gave orders, as if they had no intention of intervening. They did not care what would happen to the mercenaries. He covered part of the mercenaries with his shield, saving them from the attack. At that moment, fatigue from the inequality he had often felt in the previous world overwhelmed him again, and he pondered, realizing that now, in the heat of battle, nothing would change. Hero activated the endurance skill, and his shield became stronger. Heading towards the monsters, he loudly shouted to the mercenaries, ordering them to flee. Soon noticing that the monsters began to move slower, and realizing that this was their chance to escape, he shouted again that they had to leave immediately. Turning around, he ran away, and the surviving mercenaries rushed after him. When Keigo defeated one of the monsters, he felt his level jump. Assessing the enemy lying on the ground, he understood who he was dealing with. Before him was a hellhound, a large and agile creature that could breathe fire, but after its fiery attack became more vulnerable. Margot, who was watching all this, grimly said that going to such a place was pure suicide, and at that moment Keigo noticed that an aristocrat was approaching them, shouting something, clearly irritated, to which the hero ironically remarked that he had indeed returned. The nobleman was angry about the escape. To calm his anger a little, it was best to apologize and give part of the earned money, after which he calmed down and left, and Keigo realized that in this world, besides monsters, there were other no less dangerous enemies. Nobles. Standing by the graves of the fallen mercenaries, Keigo felt that their death affected few. Perhaps if he had to rely on that nobleman, he would not have mourned either, and the desire to live in the city only grew stronger in him. This idea had come to his mind before. Wherever he was in the city or beyond its limits, there was always a threat of encountering a monster that considered itself an aristocrat, and the fear for his life never disappeared, no matter where he went, so he decided to choose peace instead of imaginary safety. From the very beginning, he did not seek to communicate with people and understood well that he looked like an oddball, but now he did not care what others thought of him. And then Margot approached him, extended a small pouch with gold coins, and lowering her head, asked for forgiveness. Keigo just waved his hand at Juno and Margot as if to say, "No need to apologize," turned away, quickly said goodbye and did not even take the gold, because all he wanted now was to be alone. He urgently needed to get home, where Ash was waiting for him, but as he was walking to his cart, he suddenly realized how insanely tired he was, took out the herbs he had gathered earlier hoping to restore his strength. But as soon as he bit a few leaves, his body suddenly weakened, getting worse and worse every second, and soon he could no longer move either his hands or legs. Realizing with surprise that he was completely paralyzed, something he had not expected at all. Keigo woke up in an unfamiliar place and felt Ash comfortably sleeping on his chest. He cried out loudly in surprise, trying to understand where he was, and immediately noticed Juno, Margot, and Sarasa nearby, who calmly explained that the herbs he had eaten were poisonous, and that was why he had fainted. So realizing his mistake, Keigo immediately apologized to Juno and Margot. They were barely standing on their feet as it was, and on top of that had to carry him when he lost consciousness. Keigo slept for about 6 hours, and while he was dozing, Juno, Margot, and Sarasa took care of Ash and Renant. He again realized that he was causing problems for those around him, and after thanking Sarasa for the tea in bed, he smiled warmly and noted that they were all extraordinarily kind people. Sarasa lived in San Diego and was surprised to realize that all this time he had been in a hotel, sincerely thanked his friends for their care, and decided that he must somehow repay them. Sitting in the cart and returning home, he thought about how to avoid the forest in the future, because after the last encounter it was clear the monsters from the forest, especially the hellhounds, were furious, and Kaga still did not know when he would dare to meet them again, but he felt that the moment was inevitable. Keigo picked up the herb he had eaten earlier, activated the identification skill. A simple truth appeared on the screen. A green pain-relieving herb with a very strong effect and no antidote, and Keigo thought that the name really fully corresponded to its properties. Kaga stunned the prey with a calming potion, but did not dare to cut it until the poison completely left the body. He tied the carcass to a tree branch and noticed a goblin nearby. Thinking that a little training and preparation for battle would not hurt, he decided to take the chance. He sat on the ground to attract the enemy's attention, activated the outpost skill before each strike, and drank a recovery potion, while the goblin gradually grew tired and weakened. Eventually the goblin ran away, and Keigo did not even pursue it. He never chased those who fled. He tapped the shield with satisfaction and felt himself growing stronger. Remembering that wolves had not attacked for a long time, Keigo looked with interest at Ash, who was sweetly dozing on a stump, smiled, patted his friend, and enjoyed the peaceful moment. When Keigo finished work, he was pleased to notice that he had finally completed the fire daggers. Besides them, he still had items for sale and a stock of dried venison. After stroking Ash, Keigo smiled, and as if addressing him, decided as a sign of gratitude for everything to take him with him to the city. When Margot entered the room, Keigo gave him the fire daggers, took the money, and looked at him in surprise. Margot silently approached the cart and pointed to one of the items, and Keigo immediately understood what interested him, explaining that this item was intended for sale to Sarasa. Margot calmly replied that he intended to buy everything at once, and then maybe sell it to Sarasa. Keigo was surprised. Did this mean that Margot wanted to buy his goods wholesale and then resell them? But he was not worried about it and simply agreed to the offer, then pointed to a barrel of alcohol he had brought with him and said that he also had drinks, and upon hearing about the alcohol, Margot smiled broadly and was clearly delighted with such an unexpected addition to the deal. Kigo noticed that Margot did not look like a very responsible person. She was so easily ready to close the shop, but he probably could not say that. Soon his attention was drawn to Juno, who approached and asked Margot something, and it turned out that they also wanted to invite Sarasa to rest together that day. When the table was already set, and everyone was slowly sipping drinks, Sarasa suddenly took out a chicken, meaning it was time to prepare shashliks with vegetables. Kigo immediately got to work, carefully cutting the meat and vegetables, and began threading everything onto skewers. Soon the appetizing smell of grilled shashliks filled the air, and everyone became even hungrier. He had been through a lot since he got into this world. Death was constantly nearby, but he could still smile confidently just like the three beside him. Kigo pondered this confidence, but seeing Ash reaching for food, he handed him a piece of dried meat, and now he felt safe. That was enough. Kigo looked up and noticed how beautiful the sky was without skyscrapers, all sprinkled with stars and illuminated by a bright moon. He stretched, feeling his whole body ache, and thought it was because of the night spent in the carriage, but looking at Ash, he was convinced he was fine. Smiling, he stroked his fluffy fur and warmly said how cute he was, remembering that it would be good to get some water for bathing before the trip home. Kago suggested this to Ash. Hearing a joyful bark in response, he nodded and quickly gathered enough water, noting with satisfaction that everything was ready. When the water was finished, Kigo said everything was ready and suggested to Ash to set off, but just as they were about to leave, a quiet roar was heard. Looking in the direction his faithful friend was looking, Kigo was already expecting to see Murnum, and indeed. Murnum stood on a large rock, intently watching a huge snake. The snake had already noticed Murnum, but had not yet paid attention to Kigo and Ash. Kigo, feeling scared that Murnum looked like a baby next to this giant monster, sharply crouched near Ash and carefully covered his mouth so he wouldn't accidentally reveal their hiding place. The awareness of danger pushed him to act instantly. He hurriedly began gathering things to leave home as soon as possible, but suddenly heard a strange sound and froze in place. The monster, as if gathering something inside, made a strange sound and accumulated poisonous liquid. In a moment, it shot a stream of venom directly at Murnum. The poison corroded his scales, and Murnum let out a piercing scream. Kigo instantly jumped into the carriage and shouted, "Retreat!" He sharply directed the horse, forcing it to gallop at full speed to get out of the dangerous place as quickly as possible. Only for a moment did the thought of the lost-filled bathtub flash by, but he immediately dismissed it. Now was not the time. Locked in the hut and hidden in the hay, Kigo barely breathed, trying to calm his fear. His hands trembled, his heart pounded in his chest, tears rolled down his cheeks, and the same thought constantly spun in his head. What should he do now? Kigo always believed that heroes from role-playing games could defeat any monster, no matter how scary it was, and he himself was a simple farmer and could not handle such monsters alone, so there was only one option left: to seek help, where ordinary people usually ask for it. Leaving the hut, he cautiously looked around to make sure the monster was not following him, then headed to the guild, took a board with chalk and began to draw. A huge snake grew in the drawing, and in front of it stood Murnum, and when he finished, he turned and asked if anyone knew what kind of creature it was. Kato understood that if this creature was really a snake, he could not handle it alone and could only hope for help from others. He really wanted someone to defeat this monster. Soon an announcement about a job thundered. It was necessary to tame the snake, for which they gave 5 gold coins, but he felt that he should not take on something he could not handle. Survival was more important to him. Life was more valuable than unnecessary risks, so he decided to stick only to what he could realistically do himself and avoid groundless danger. After a few days, Kigo was quite tired. Digging a ditch turned out to be incredibly exhausting, but he calmed himself with the simple thought that even a small step forward is better than standing still, and he was lucky. An experienced team of adventurers responded to his announcement, who not only agreed to help but somehow found his missing bathtub. Kigo knew that in such situations it was worth turning to adventurers. That was right. He did not want Cacatrixes or hellhounds to attack his house from the forest, so he decided. From now on, he would entrust the protection of his home to adventurers. Looking around, he thought he hadn't approached the water for a long time. Returning to Ash, he said he was going to empty the bathtub, but then noticed that the dog was acting strangely, froze, and cautiously asked what was wrong. As soon as Kigo asked his question, Ash suddenly disappeared somewhere, and Murnum surfaced from the water. Kigo was momentarily alarmed, but seeing who it was, he immediately sighed with relief. Fortunately, it was only Murnum in front of him. He did not want to fight at all, but since the opponent was here, there was nothing to worry about, and it was a good chance to test one of his ideas, so squinting, he drew the bowstring and shot a tranquilizer arrow into Murnum's shoulder. As soon as the arrow hit Murnum's shoulder, the creature instantly weakened and slowly fell over. Kag did not hesitate. He approached, and with one precise strike cut off its head. Examining the prey, he noticed Although Murnum's appearance was strange, inside it resembled a fish, so Kag wondered, maybe it could be eaten. But now was not the time for that first. He needed to start processing Manama Hahai Blan. As expected, Murnums were in high demand as an ingredient for potions, so Kago couldn't resist and asked her to show how to properly skin the monster to avoid mistakes next time. He wondered if it was possible to determine the properties of ingredients by taste, but remembered that the painkiller had not worn off yet, and its effect would last 6 hours. Moreover, he got a new portion of Murnum's scales, which reminded him of the forge his enchanted daggers were already glowing, and that was very helpful for survival, so he suddenly thought. What if he cast a water spell on the dagger? Kago curiously felt the new enchanted dagger, activated the evaluation skill, and noticed drops of water dripping from the tip. He frowned, thinking, because at first it looked like ordinary water, but suddenly the thought came. If you stick the dagger into a bottle, you can collect clean drinking water, and this thing could be extremely useful in everyday life, although it would hardly help in battle. Kiko wondered how long it would take to fill irregular barrel watering fields, watering livestock. A lot of water was needed, but now he had a new source. He thought it was worth making a few more such daggers both for sale and for himself, and immediately came up with how to proceed. After bathing, he enjoyed the warm water and eagerly awaited filling the bathtub again, but he did not have long to rest. It was time to start cooking. Mern meat turned out to be incredibly tasty, so Kago still decided to fry it more reliable. White wine would perfectly suit this dish, but fruit ale was also great. In taste, the meat resembled white fish, only local from this world. Looking around the pond, he saw many different animals and fish, a real paradise for a cook. However, Kago stopped in time, remembering that these were hunting grounds of the same snakes. If you want to survive, it's better to stay away from such places. Kago sighed, realizing that he was arguing with himself again, but it no longer mattered. The main thing was to earn some money to make a new order at the Adventurers Guild if needed. He turned to Ash and suggested going with him to the city the next day to sell new daggers, especially attracted by the water dagger that could release water, a very convenient thing in everyday life. He decided to sell 2 daggers to Sarasi and 2 more to Margot, but as soon as Kago voiced this, Margot immediately shouted that he wanted to take all 4, and a quarrel began between him and Sarasi, each trying to convince Kago to give the daggers to him. Ash barked loudly and calmed the dispute. It seemed that this time Margot won. Strangely, their quarrels somehow calmed them, and at that moment Kago noticed Juno standing aside with a sad face. It was clear that something was bothering him, and he involuntarily wondered what was wrong. Kago petted Ash and promised to come back for him when they finished their business, and his thoughts involuntarily returned to the past. When he worked at a trading company, he often had to communicate with foreigners, but he could not get close to them. Lack of language knowledge created a barrier between them, and communication became tense and awkward, so even being in a new world, Kago still did not dare to let people get close. In this world, friends can be found even without a large vocabulary, so Kago did not stress about learning new words. He was understood anyway, even when he spoke not very precisely, and the relationships that had already formed were quite enough for him. Kago decided to find out what the item from Margot really cost, and discovered that the claws of the hellhound were suitable for blacksmithing, and the powder from them was good for creating fire-resistant spells and fire amulets. This discovery fascinated him so much that he locked himself at home for several days and worked, later crafting something like Hellfire and a special fist shield from the dog's materials, which excellently protected against fire attacks, providing great fire resistance. Kago enchanted the fire shield and reinforced it with metal, thinking that now he could fend off the hellhound. He decided to test the new sword, swung it, and raised a small fire vortex, the strike of which completely destroyed the chair on which he was testing the weapon. Looking at the aftermath, Kago realized how dangerous this weapon was, and at that moment Ash suddenly barked loudly, making Kago alert and notice that his prey had fallen into a trap. If not for the faithful dog, he would not have noticed. Kago noticed that recently animals were increasingly caught in traps with paralyzing poison. Deciding that the rabbit could be cooked a little later, he took on the meat of deer and boar. They needed to be cooked immediately. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that the bath was almost full and felt that today he really deserved a hot bath to finally rest. Later, savoring the cooked deer meat, he could not help but admit how tasty it was. Kiko felt as if he was truly living carefree. He cut off some venison and served it to Eshu, watching him eat with pleasure. In his past life, he often thought about becoming a farmer and living peacefully, and now it seemed possible if not for the danger from the nobility and monsters. Simple happiness and a cozy home seemed to him ideal. But these thoughts were interrupted when he noticed Margot and Juno approaching him, and immediately wondered if they had been hunting today, because recently monsters were becoming stronger. Kiko thought that this time, probably no one would take him, but looking at Margot and Juno, he realized they were going to go anyway. Stopping Juno, Kiko gave them some potions. They would now be more useful to friends. Juno thanked him and nodded gratefully. Kaga noticed that Margot did not go with Juno and wondered why, but before he could ask anything, she silently began to undress and took the bath Kaga just sighed. His plans to bathe with ashes would have to be postponed. He decided not to make a big deal out of it, especially since his gaze fell on a pile of various ingredients that Margot had brought with her, and to his surprise, she said she was giving them all away, which made Kaga suspect that she simply wanted to buy off and be able to do whatever she wanted in his house. But the ingredients were very valuable, so after a moment of silence, he thanked her, and she just nodded fine. If so, he would take everything. It would only benefit him. Higo told Margot that he was going to gather herbs, and Margot went with him without hesitation. Strangely, being near him made her feel somehow calmer, and when they were rummaging in the grass, Margot suddenly froze and pointed to the side. Kigo looked and saw a group of unfamiliar monsters, after which Margot shouted for Kigo to shoot with the bow, and Kigo briefly replied that he understood. He had never met such creatures before, but Margot was calm as if he had seen them many times. After the fight with the new monsters, Kigo felt that he had become a little stronger, looked over the fallen enemies, and realized they were a cobalt warrior and a gray bear real opponents, but he handled them. Returning home, he was surprised. Margot had again taken over the bathroom and was laughing loudly, clearly enjoying the rest, and Kigo just smiled at her lightness and did not object. Let her rest as long as she wants. After a successful hunt, Kigo and Margot received valuable ingredients from the defeated monsters. Margot decided to disassemble the carcasses in the city, thanked for the help and left, and Kigo, who could not help but notice how easily she had broken into his usual solitary life and turned it upside down, although he loved solitude, realized that recently he had made many friends. This was unlike his usual lifestyle, but it did not cause discomfort. When he worked in a trading company, he also had to communicate with many, but now these connections seemed warmer and more genuine, and thinking about all this, he suddenly fixed his gaze on an oil lamp. Higo often noticed that the town used oil lamps that shone thanks to demon cores obtained after defeating monsters. Looking at the bright glow of one such lantern, he recalled how during the last expedition they also managed to find a similar core. The light seemed really beautiful to him, and he mentally noted this for himself. Meanwhile, Eshu was already sleeping sweetly, hiding and comfortably settled on his arm. Kigo gently adjusted the dog's fur and, wishing him good night, allowed himself to relax a little. Sitting down to work, Kiko began to record his observations and compile his own encyclopedia. He thought that if someone did not have a guidebook about this world, he could make one himself, and such a book would definitely come in handy, especially in the city. Gratefully remembering Margot for all her help, he again immersed himself in work, because life in Lancaster was slowly returning to its usual course, but this did not mean that the danger had disappeared. The threat still hung over him, reminding him that peace could be temporary. Kigo used the skill Endurance to soften Murnam's blow and push the enemy back a little, at the right moment cast Hellish Roar, but unfortunately it did not affect the monster. Realizing that the magic of his sword had no effect, he took a simpler path and struck directly, but even this time only pushed Murnam back a little. Kigo felled the Murnam with a single precise strike, and it became easier for him to fight these creatures because he began to think about how different properties interact. He noticed. Water attacks penetrate fire-resistant armor, while fire can do nothing against water opponents. Although Kigo tried to avoid unnecessary clashes, understanding the magical properties of this world was extremely important, so he decided to conduct a few more experiments with water element Murnams to better understand how the elements work. Besides, this replenished his supplies of valuable scales and meat, and today's catch especially pleased him. When Kigo closed the cart, he suddenly heard a strange noise. Turning around, he saw a snake crawling straight towards him, and realizing it was dangerous, he instantly jumped into the cart and, without wasting time, ordered the horse to gallop forward. All the way, Ash barked incessantly at the snake, trying to scare it, and Kigo realized it was better not to provoke such a dangerous creature, called the dog to himself, hoping to avoid unnecessary trouble, and upon returning home, immediately hid in the hut and locked the door. Hiding in the hut, Kigo quietly repeated to himself that he had made a mistake because the recent victories over the Murnams had relaxed him, and he completely forgot about a much more serious danger, the snake wandering nearby. So he prayed that this monster would not find his hiding place and not appear at home, and because of these anxious thoughts and strong fear, he could not sleep a single minute all night. When Kigo returned to the Adventurers Guild, he updated his order and increased the reward for taming the snake. While making changes, it briefly occurred to him that it was worth strengthening the defense in this area and setting more traps around the house. He had already sent a request to destroy the monster, but he felt this might not be enough. What else could he do to protect himself? Kigo brewed the gibble poison together with the poisonous glands of the cicatrix, which Margot had given him, but when it was time to try the mixture, he hesitated. It was scary, but without testing, he would never know how it worked, so hoping the antidote would help, he dared to take a sip and immediately, without waiting for the consequences, took the prepared antidote. Did not work completely. Strength instantly left Keigo, and he fell to the floor unable to get up, while Ash, seeing his master was unwell, started barking and tried to bring him to consciousness. After drinking another dose of antidote and overcoming weakness, Keigo finally came to his senses. Assessing the situation, he realized he had been given a very dangerous poison, even a drop of which could kill, and this took his breath away, so he hugged Ash, who was pacing nervously back and forth, tried to calm him by stroking his fur and quietly apologizing for making him worry. Keigo hoped so much that this poison would really scare off the snake. His voice trembled with a plea. Let it work. Although the preparation was far from ideal, he did everything he could. Set traps, invented medicine, thought through various protection options. He ran his hand over his forehead trying to gather his thoughts, but his head was still spinning after testing the poison. He only hoped the snake would not appear in his home. After a sleepless night of fear, Keigo was completely exhausted. His body did not obey, but he forced himself to get up. Finally, morning came, which meant he had to take care of Ash, so returning to the dog, he was about to feed him, but suddenly the dog barked loudly, and Keigo felt a chill inside. Something was wrong. Grabbing his weapon, he tensed and listened to the surrounding sounds. Fear gripped him, but Keigo understood. He had to find out what had happened. Keigo froze at the sight of the snake. He immediately understood. Chances of survival were almost none. His heart pounded wildly. His legs seemed rooted to the ground. The thought of running away flashed through his mind, but he knew it was useless. He was already as if saying goodbye to life and preparing to flee when Suddenly a group of adventurers appeared before Keigo and Ash, standing between them and the snake, and the warriors rushed into battle without hesitation. Some cast spells, others cut the snake with swords. The ground trembled from strong blows, magic flashed in the air, and the snake, hissing fiercely, lunged at the attackers. Keigo froze in shock and could not take his eyes off the battle unfolding before him. He knew this was his only chance to survive, but his body did not obey. Fear paralyzed every movement. Ash pressed his ears to his head and growled quietly, not leaving his master. Keigo fell to one knee, confused and tightly gripping Ash. Chaos raged in his head. He tried to understand what was happening, but the battle raged around him. Flashes of magic and muffled blows against the dragon's scales only confused him more. He felt only one thing: this was not his place. It was better to let the real heroes do their job, and at that very moment the dragon coiled into an attack. Its body tensed, ominous steam slowly rose from its jaws, and it was about to spit poison that could corrode all living things. The man fighting hand to hand managed to raise his shield and partially protect himself from the dragon's poisonous attack. The venom in the form of vapors enveloped his defense, but the barrier withstood the blow. Without wasting time, he turned to the two mages who had come with him and loudly called them for help. The mages reacted instantly and began casting spells, and the dragon, as if sensing danger, tensed its huge body again, preparing for a new attack. The mages concentrated all their power and together released a spell that burst into the sky like a fiery tornado. Flames rose up and completely engulfed the giant dragon, and after just a few seconds its skin began to char, then crumbled to ashes. The heat was so intense that even Keigo, standing aside, instinctively covered his face with his hand, and when the fire died down, there was no trace left of the dragon, only scorched earth reminded of that danger. After the victory, the travelers felt they had succeeded together and done so brilliantly. Keigo, who had not yet recovered from the ordeal, sincerely thanked them and realized that it was not in vain that he had turned to the guild for help. Watching his rescuers leave, he marveled at their coordinated work. They fearlessly engaged in battle with a dangerous creature and defeated it together, and Keigo realized he had witnessed true unity and strength, which he himself still lacked. After sleepless nights, Keigo finally fell asleep. When he woke and went outside, everything became clear. It was not a dream but reality. Chaos and turmoil reigned around. Traces of the battle with the dragon glowed everywhere, and all his prepared means of defense proved useless against such power. And the realization of how close he had come to death took his breath away. But despite fear and horror, Keigo was alive. He and Esh were alive, and that was the most important thing, he thought, surveying the ruins, when suddenly he heard someone calling him. Margot and Juno arrived from the city. It seemed the guild had told them about the dragon's appearance, so they were very worried and hurried here, anxious about Keigo. He tried to appear calm and assured them he was fine, thanked them for their concern, but before he could finish speaking, both friends rushed to him, hugged him, and sincerely rejoiced that he was okay. Their relief and care were genuine. Keigo was momentarily confused and did not know how to react, but eventually he exhaled and allowed himself to relax, feeling how good it was when someone cared about you. Margot took a bath and completely relaxed, enjoying the warmth of the water. Meanwhile, Keigo poured a drink for Juno, who accepted it gratefully. Although they disturbed his peace, he thought it probably wasn't so bad. It was cozy and familiar nearby. Keigo sat beside him, looked up at the sky, and dreamily gazed at the stars shining above him like an endless canvas. The master called him Esh, On the second level, this wolf pup grew very slowly due to the uniqueness of his species, and Esh barely left his master's side. He followed him step by step, and even in his sleep pressed close because he considered the master's feet the calmest and safest place to rest. Esh loved meat the most, especially the kind his master gave him. It was very tasty. The master also had a mare named Rosianta and a silly chicken, but he could not eat the chicken. Rosianta loved fresh grass the most. The chicken loved worms. Once Esh decided to help the chicken and brought her worms, but the master sternly said that this was not allowed, and Esh, being an obedient boy, agreed. If it was not allowed, then it was not allowed. Esh was always near his master and followed him step by step. Every day brought a new adventure. Where would they go today? Once a terrible monster attacked the master, and then Esh barked without hesitation to scare it away. His fierce bark really made the enemy retreat. The master petted Esh, and at that moment the wolf pup felt the happiest in the world. One day a quarrel broke out between an old man and a young woman over Kigo's attention. Esh could not stand it and barked loudly, trying to calm them down. But instead the girl suddenly grabbed the wolf pup and held him so tightly that he almost suffocated, whining plaintively as if asking for help. And Kigo looked at this with a strange expression on his face, and Esh never understood what it meant. Esh simply adored singing. One day he was sitting in the bath with his master and humming Tadadan, which gave him great pleasure. The wolf pup was incredibly happy when singing together with Keigo. He ran very fast and loved madly chasing everything thrown to him. Most of all, he liked it when the master threw a bone, and at such moments Esh considered it the best game in the world. When Ash brought the bone back, the master always petted him. It was incredibly pleasant, but despite all his kindness, Keigo was sometimes so inattentive. The wolf noticed that there was no water left in his bowl at all. He approached the master and tried to wake him up, but he did not respond, and then Ash began to growl, then whine, and then even jump near the bed. Come on, time to get up. How can you sleep when there is no water in the bowl? Very strange, master. The room was so hot that Ash barely stood on his feet. He knew it was dangerous and had told himself more than once, but now he could not fall. He had to guard his master until he woke up. Ash always felt when danger was approaching, and something big and long was lurking in the corner in the dark. Come on, come out. The wolf growled tiredly, not taking his eyes off the shadow. He always warned the master about the threat, even if he himself was afraid, and this time would be no exception. He would protect Kaga, protect Rosiant. The creature suddenly lunged forward, but Ash did not even think of retreating. Someone decided to scare him with just a look. Nonsense. Ash is not so easy to stop. But despite everything, the master remained the kindest person in the world. Ash always felt that he wanted to be near him, wherever he went. He was Ash, a wolf named Ash, a faithful friend and protector of his master. That day Okuda was accompanied and guarded by two men, Margot and Juno, who were good fighters, and all together with the faithful dog Ash were gathering medicinal herbs deep in the forest. If Okuda had been alone in the forest, he would never have gone so far. He felt much calmer because reliable comrades he trusted were nearby. Margot decisively said that the target was right here, and they needed to move forward. Soon they entered into battle and quickly destroyed the monster with almost no losses, and he noted that the fight turned out to be easier than expected, and the victory came to them very simply. Margot, one of the fighters, noticed an enemy sneaking up from behind and shouted a warning to everyone, but Okuda did not have time to dodge. He was suddenly grabbed and hit, and at that moment even bigger, giant monsters than before burst onto the battlefield, and he, seeing among them a particularly dangerous creature, was stunned. A cockatrice appeared in this place. He noticed to himself that the group changed formation to better cope with the threat, and this time he was to be at the front with a shield and hold back the enemy. When the cockatrice's eyes suddenly lit up, he felt his heart tighten. He understood. Now it would try to turn him to stone. Without hesitation, he immediately activated his defensive skill called Fortress to withstand this attack. Okuda felt his hand go numb. In his head, he reminded himself to stay calm and drink the potion as he had done before in such cases. Margot reacted in time and handed him the potion, which quickly improved his condition, and Okuda took the bottle and thanked her for the timely help. Ash, who was standing nearby, barked as if encouraging everyone. He praised the dog and gave the signal to start the counterattack. Margot and Juno acted together and supported him in the attack. Together, they dealt a powerful blow to the enemy, brilliantly demonstrating their coordinated work. After the battle, the system exploded with a message. The character level rose from 12 to 13, and along with that the main attributes changed. Health grew from 26 to 28, magical energy from 16 to 27, endurance increased from 19 to 21, strength from 25 to 27, intellect from 76 to 77, agility from 31 to 33, and speed from 25 to 27. Okuda felt power within himself. He became stronger and achieved noticeable progress. But he finally understood. The most important thing is not only strength, but also reliable friends nearby. The mission succeeded. The group returned to the city without any losses. The first to approach Okuda was Sarasa, and he remembered that he last saw her before the snake attacked his home. He felt that despite everything he had been through, he was okay. Inside, he felt such satisfaction that words could not convey it. He really liked the idea of a simple, ordinary life without changes and adventures, but since he found himself in this world, no day was like another. Every day new difficulties and trials appeared. Earlier, when he worked at the company, work completely consumed him. After saying goodbye to colleagues, an unpleasant silence and the emptiness of loneliness overwhelmed him, and it seemed to him that his former comrades were having fun and enjoying life. Although he was selfish, he could not deny he liked a quiet, measured life, but deep in his heart, he most desired true freedom. Many think that even experienced adventurers barely cope with such an enemy as a snake. He admitted that if a dragon attacked him, it could have ended in death for him. That is why he decided to become stronger and survive under any circumstances. Magic seemed to him a good way to increase his chances, and he joked as if he had strong magic from the very beginning, although it was not so, because life was harsh for him and did not forgive mistakes. Only recently did he realize that rare abilities for alchemy and blacksmithing had awakened within him. No one else could make potions and weapons as powerful as he could. Even Margot, who was well versed in crafts, could not replicate his work. Although he did not possess fire magic, his flaming sword produced the same effect, and if he could not heal with magic, he brewed potions that restored health and removed negative effects. All this happened thanks to his unique ability to assess accurately. He admitted to himself he had previously greatly underestimated how important it was. When he took up alchemy and blacksmithing, he realized that this would lead him to true success. Whatever path he chose, everything would depend on his persistence and diligent work, and with these thoughts, he gradually fell asleep. He woke up and suddenly remembered he still had a bow. Later, he went to training to improve his archery skills, and during the session, sincerely thanked his mentor, Master Kai, for the help and instruction. In response, Kai commanded, "Shoot," and demonstrated how to properly release an arrow from the bow. He understood this skill makes arrows piercing and strikes much stronger, so he decided that this was exactly what was needed against monsters immune to magic. Although he had gained great power, he understood dangerous creatures still lurked in the shadows of this world, and as soon as he relaxed, he could even lose his life. Kai nodded to Okuda, indicating that now he should shoot, and Okuda calmly accepted this, focused, took a comfortable stance, prepared himself confidently, and clearly set the goal to hit the target. At that moment he thought, why risk life in close combat with a sword, if it is simpler and safer to learn archery and keep distance? Learning magic from scratch is much harder and longer, so the bow seemed the smartest option for survival, and he decided to devote all his efforts to bow training. Suddenly, the system confirmed his success. Kigo Okuda mastered a new combat technique called piercing shot, but he understood well that hitting the target on the first try was almost impossible, so he calmly accepted the result, thanked for the gained experience, and prepared to leave. After that, he approached Den, gathered his courage, and said that he wanted to officially request subordination, and suddenly remembered that such requests happen quite often. He always does this as soon as he notices especially strong monsters near his home. Looking at his old bow, he noticed that it was already very worn out and had become significantly weaker, so he decided to go to the weapons store. Okuda sighed with relief when he realized that he now had a new bow, and suddenly saw Margot walking towards him with a smile, and began to guess what exactly she wanted to say. Okuda felt uneasy and mentally begged Margot not to do anything rash. He thought that closing the store in broad daylight was not the best idea, because it could reveal that he drinks every day, and that was not very wise. He quietly but persistently asked her to abandon this idea. To himself, he noticed that Margot had some special frivolity, not like most people around. Soon he completed the complex process of creating a special substance, petrified sand, waited until the cockatrice's eye completely dried, and sighed with relief, feeling that this painstaking work was finally finished. The system notified about the creation of a new weapon, a petrified arrow, which had a unique property. After hitting, the target immediately turned to stone. Okuda remembered that he already knew how to make poisonous and paralyzing arrows, but realized that they needed to be stored separately from hunting arrows to avoid confusion during hunting, and at that moment, his dog Ash barked loudly and caught Okuda's attention. Okuda suddenly became alert, trying hard to understand what caused the commotion. Seeing noble people approaching, he immediately froze and felt tension rising inside. Baron approached and, leaving Okuda no choice, coldly said that he had to go with them. Thoughts spun in Okuda's head. Could it be that they really demanded him to go with them? He politely bowed and sincerely apologized, wishing to show his readiness to obey the leadership, but saw that they were still dissatisfied. He quietly handed them a coin, and that was the end of it. The noble guests left without saying a word. Okuda took a deep breath and thought that the situation had been dangerous, but he managed to get out without any consequences. he felt relief this time neither Margot nor Juno was nearby. He did not want them to see this quarrel. Looking at the travelers who were walking away, he felt sorry for them. They were tired and joyless, and for a moment he mentally wished them a safe return, but quickly pushed it away, reminding himself that their lives were none of his business. He was pleased that he had managed to replenish his supplies, but he still needed to check the herbs he had gathered in the forest. Although he really did not want to risk it due to possible toxicity, he understood it would have to be done. At that moment, the noise from the street again pulled him out of his thoughts. He looked out the window and saw noble people had come to him again. Okuda had not yet fully understood what was happening, but his gaze froze when he saw the consequences. Petrification had covered a large area. Frightened, he rushed to look for Perron's potion. Fortunately, he found it very quickly. Assessing the situation, he realized that people had been harmed due to a basilisk attack. Okuda saw many wounded, and with relief understood that none of them had died. He realized that the adventurers had failed again and had not reached the dungeon. Standing among the wounded, he barely restrained his irritation. He did not want to say it aloud, but inside he was torn by outrage that they had caused chaos on his territory again. He thought that this barn was not at all a place for a field hospital. Suddenly he clearly understood. The real culprit of all this was the nobleman himself, and he must be held responsible for it. Okuda swore to himself that next time he would definitely make him compensate for the damage caused. Irritation was growing, and in his thoughts he constantly called the gentleman a fool. But he did not abandon the victims to their fate. He treated them to drinks, and the grateful travelers sincerely thanked him. The master kept urging them on, grumbling impatiently, while Okuda quietly prayed in his soul that they would never return. When the commotion finally subsided, he became curious about where the master's horse had gone. Then he sighed with relief. He was left alone and could calmly continue with his own affairs. Byron, an aristocrat from an ancient, respected family that had lived in Leicester for generations. Almost all the city's inhabitants knew about this family and its glorious history. In Leicester, there was no one who had not heard of the legendary name Byron. It was firmly entrenched in the memory of every city resident. Lately, the city had become restless. Monster attacks had become more frequent, and he explained this by the fact that the dungeon in the neighboring forest was overcrowded with dangerous creatures. So, in his opinion, there were significantly more monsters near the city. Realizing that his past obliged him to act, Byron felt the burden of responsibility descend upon him. He firmly believed that a true nobleman must protect his hometown, maintain order, and be brave, so he gathered a team of adventurers himself and led them into the forest dungeon to clear it of dangers. To great disappointment, the expedition did not bring the expected results and actually failed even before it began. The companions turned out to be completely unprepared for battle and showed total helplessness, and when they encountered an ordinary cockatrice, not the strongest, but still a dangerous monster, the so-called adventurers scattered in panic in all directions. Fortunately, his dear mare Melty, who was always nearby, was returned safe and sound. This decision was made to avoid exposing her to danger during encounters with monsters. After the unsuccessful campaign, Byron returned to his chambers and felt such deep sorrow that it instantly overwhelmed him. For 3 days and 3 nights, his pillow was wet with tears. His soul ached so much. In his thoughts, he turned to his beloved and whispered for her to wait for him. He gave himself a vow that he would definitely restore her former appearance, no matter how difficult the road or how much gold it would cost. Byron sincerely believed that his subordinates should work tirelessly for the honor of their lord, and any disrespect towards this was a grave fault requiring severe punishment. The companions he had chosen not only let him down, but also tarnished his good name and even tried to justify themselves, so he unhesitatingly ordered them to be detained for a week, considering it part of his noble duties. Byron was convinced that only the nobles themselves should punish those who let them down, and warned everyone to think carefully before quarreling with him. Outside the city lived an eccentric man hid from people and was completely unlike others. According to Byron, that man clearly knew his role in society. And as soon as he saw that Byron had turned to stone, he instantly rushed to help him and was able to heal him. And like others, this man was not just reliable, but truly useful. Also, the meat dish that the man called kunse turned out to be the most delicious Byron had ever tasted. He was so impressed that he decided, next time he would definitely make this man his faithful assistant and go with him into the dungeon hall for the sake of his own honor, because he considered himself a hero of this land, whose name should become known to all. In his imagination, he was already preparing for battle with monsters and shouted decisively that he was going after them. A loud laugh, full of confidence and inner fire, burst from him, and along with it flew a name from his lips full of passion. Melty. One of the guild workers was named Dan, and lately he was literally drowning in work. Dangerous creatures, basilisks, snakes, and other monsters that truly threatened people began to multiply around the city. Dan was convinced that the overcrowded dungeon near the city was to blame for everything. He knew that if decisive measures were not taken immediately, it would turn into a disaster both for the city residents and for the neighboring districts. The first warning signs had already appeared. Economy was noticeably weakening and declining. When the danger increased, the guild began actively helping adventurers who took on destroying monsters and protecting peaceful residents. These brave people risked their lives daily to save others. Dan felt it to his bones. No one would take such a risk, just like Thattenley, a complete fool would agree to such danger without a worthy reward. He really wanted to properly thank the brave people, but he had very few opportunities. The guild had no money, and the clients paid little. He emphasized that another important factor in this situation was a local nobleman with great influence. This man turned out to be Baron, and according to Dan, he was too stingy. Even in hours of great danger, when the city's defenders desperately needed support, Baron still cut the guild's budget. Dan was sure if more rewards were given for completing tasks, stronger adventurers would be drawn to them, who would rush to fight monsters. Victory over the monsters would allow a return to normal economic life, and this would open the way to restoring the tax system. But as Dan noted, this nobleman near the rune did not understand even the simplest things, and his behavior looked simply ridiculous because of this. He constantly caused problems for everyone around. To find a way out of the mess, Dan went to consult the guildmaster. But it turned out that the reward the guild could offer adventurers was ridiculously small and did not correspond at all to the level of threat. And then, as if from the shadows, a mysterious man named Keigo Okuda appeared. Although he himself was also an adventurer, he behaved completely differently. He invented tasks himself and offered huge sums for them. Although these jobs concerned super powerful and very dangerous monsters, the reward fully compensated for the risk. Dan sincerely thanked this man. Dan thought that Keigo was closely connected with Margot, Yuno, and Sarasa. He often saw them together, and he also assumed that, besides adventures, Keigo earned extra money by selling various things, although this was only his guess. He did not care where the money came from, only one thing mattered. Keigo generously and regularly paid the guild for placing orders, and Dan realized that he needed to watch this strange man's actions more closely and value his support. After that story with the arrogant aristocrat, Okuda met again with his comrades, with whom he had been through a lot. Having made sure that he was fine and nothing bad had happened, they decided to arrange a merry party to relax and feel the joy of life again. He was especially impressed by Sarasa. It turned out she was not at all against drinking, and did it so confidently that it was clear. She not only endured it but clearly enjoyed it. While laughter and jokes were heard, the friends persistently asked to tell what had happened between him and that nobleman and how it all ended. And Okuda, sincerely trying to explain, said that he gave him money and asked him not to bother or interfere in his life anymore. He tried to explain everything in the local language. Although he spoke not very confidently, his words sounded strange and with mistakes. To better convey his thought, he waved his hands and made expressive grimaces, hoping that this way he would be understood, but he himself was not sure how much the people around him understood. He confidently said that they liked the story from their faces, laughter, and reactions. It was clear that it aroused lively interest. That night, which was usually calm and quiet, suddenly exploded for him with noise, laughter, and events, and he realized, this is not bad at all, but on the contrary pleasantly refreshing. Realizing that nothing could be changed anymore and the day was over, Okuda wished everyone good night, finding peace with the past within himself. The next morning, when the first sun rays broke through the window, he, a little awkwardly, offered his comrades water and, recalling yesterday's feast, reminded them to be careful. When everyone left, he noticed that he had drunk quite a lot, but miraculously still remained in a great mood. He thought that earlier after alcohol he felt worse, but now, perhaps thanks to experience in evaluation and constant experiments with various poisons, his body had become better at tolerating the negative impact. Suddenly he remembered the herb he had recently found in the forest and realized that he had not checked it yet. By appearance and from his own experience, he expected nothing good and already anticipated some trouble, but still decided to conduct a small experiment. He carefully licked the leaf and was quite surprised. No numbness, pain, or strange sensations. The leaf was fresh in taste, even somewhat reminiscent of mint, which impressed him greatly. Anxiety rose inside him. For a moment he thought he had lost his mind, but quickly gathered himself and applied his skill of evaluation. The system, as always, did not fail. Clearly and reliably showed that the plant he found was marble grass. It could be eaten, and it was perfect for drying and brewing tea. He rejoiced at this discovery, because now it was clear that it was not poison but a useful natural ingredient, and he decided next time to definitely treat Sarasu with an aromatic drink, but for now he needed to properly dry the leaves. At that moment he heard the first drops of rain. In this world he saw rain for the first time. Not wanting to waste time, he headed to the forge to continue work until the rain ended. Later, the system again produced a result. It created a new weapon called Hell Arrow, which blazed with medium-strength flames, and Okuda sincerely rejoiced. He managed to complete the creation of an elemental weapon. Moreover, he remembered that earlier he had filled his quiver with the water element, and this gave him an interesting idea if he could add an element to the quiver. Then by using the evaluation skill, he could learn to enchant items. And he really did so. The system reported the creation of a water plate. It was an iron plate soaked with the water element, on which moisture gathered, and now he understood that spells could be applied not only to weapons, but also to armor and household items. To make the plate bigger, he lacked the scales that he was supposed to receive later, and when the results showed that the plate collected water better than water paddles, this discovery incredibly inspired him. He began to imagine how to use this ability in everyday life: a cup that creates water by itself, a frying pan that releases fire, a broom that collects dust on its own, or a rope that can petrify. All these ideas would be useful and would definitely find demand, since no one had done this before. Despite his abilities, he stubbornly reminded himself his true purpose was to live alone and quietly, away from human noise and bustle. If he became too noticeable again, he might get noticed by the same lord, and he did not want that at all. He got back to work again. Soon he noticed that his dog Ash was all muddy. It seemed he liked the rain, and this cheered Okuda up a bit. The dog barked happily in response to his words, and Okuda took a deep breath of fresh air and felt a surge of energy. After a few days, the rain finally stopped, and the air was filled with the pleasant smell of wet soil. Bright blue sky with slow white clouds, and the soft warmth of the sun seemed to whisper peace. He had already fed all the animals and watered the garden, so now in the silence and tranquility, he began to feel sleepy. Suddenly, he noticed a carriage approaching. Everything inside him tensed up. He felt that everything was turning against him. In Okuda's soul, a hope still smoldered that it was just a coincidence, but soon he heard Margot's voice calling him and Byron. The name Byron touched memories in him, although he could not remember where exactly he had heard it. He took out his tablet and tried to start a conversation. It turned out that the guild leader had chosen a squad: Margot, Juno, Kai, and himself to accompany that same aristocrat, and this news did not please him at all. He wondered why the nobles were so eager to capture the dungeon. Perhaps because of overcrowding, monsters began to appear on the surface, so these places really needed to be cleared, and Okuda would only benefit from this. His home would become much safer. He did not trust Byron. He considered him a person who knew nothing about important matters, lacked the necessary experience, but still tried to command and impose his decisions. In simple words, for him, Byron was an amateur. He really did not want to go on the expedition, but he thought that with the strongest warriors of the city it might not be so dangerous. He truly wanted the dungeon cleansing to go well, so when the day finally came, he began to prepare. Looking at the guildmaster, he noticed a calm, steady confidence in him, and Guildmaster Shiraku addressed the adventurer team, sincerely thanking them for their participation in the recent operation. Okuda realized that his strength was not like the others, so he joined the support team, which included healers and those who helped from the rear. And at that moment, Sarasa approached him and silently handed him a bracelet, which surprised him greatly. When he realized it was not just an ornament, he instantly activated the appraisal skill. The system immediately showed the result: a bracelet with poison protection that prevents the wearer from being poisoned. Okuda froze in amazement. Such things are expensive, so he sincerely thanked Sarasa and promised to take care of her gift. Then he recognized something strange in Kai's gaze. There was no hostility, but there was tension and some stubbornness. Okuda decided that the right moment had come. He tried to calm himself with the thought their group had enough strong people, and if everyone stayed calm, even such a dangerous opponent as a snake could be defeated. But on the way, no monster appeared, and this immediately made them wary. It meant all the creatures had gathered right in the dungeon. When they reached the entrance, Byron commanded grimly, "We begin the attack." The adventurer rushed swiftly into battle. Okuda watched with admiration as his guild comrades worked together. The guildmaster, Kai, and other warriors acted as one, showing refined skill. He, offering his shoulder to others, distributed potions to those injured. Later, he realized that the role of healer was also very important. If this continued, he himself would become a true healer. But soon he ran out of all potions and healing herbs. Monsters still surrounded them, and the warrior had almost no strength left. He anxiously watched the argument between the squad members and Byron, silently praying for it to end soon and for the order to retreat to finally be given. Fortunately, he still decided to retreat. Once again, they failed to capture the dungeon, even though the strongest fighters of the city were thrown into the battle. It was clear next time they would have to face even stronger enemies. Okuda realized he needed to become stronger. When he returned home, he saw that Sarasa had already set the table. Everything was ready because she had put a piece of her soul into the dishes in advance. He sincerely thanked her. Her care truly touched him. Okuda thought that although there was a language barrier between them, actions and gestures spoke louder than words, and they already understood each other better. Later, the potion was finally ready, but he was exhausted and decided to rest a little. The night was quiet, and in the morning he realized with surprise that he had not felt so relaxed among people. For a long time it was unusual but pleasant. Soon he heard a knock at the door. It was Shuraku. The guild leader handed him sacks. They were incredibly heavy, and inside, as it turned out, were piles of gold coins. Inside there was a letter, and Okuda, using his evaluation skill, found out. This was a message of thanks and a reward for unused potions. He was very surprised, but immediately understood that his efforts were noticed and appreciated. When Shuraku remembered Margot and Juno, Okuda immediately realized that those heavy bags should be given to them, and he thought that Shuraku looked exhausted and aged, probably from interacting with those noble people. He woke his comrades and called them to breakfast, thinking that a cup of tea was just the thing to start the day well. Everyone sincerely thanked him for the treat. Shuraku finished his tea and said goodbye to everyone. Okuda thought that he was probably very busy since he left so quickly, and also said goodbye, thanking him for stopping by. Hope was burning inside him. Maybe finally, this important fact would reach that noblemen, even such a powerful team, could not cope with the dungeon. Perhaps peace would come to this area for a short time. They did not even have time to rest properly. Okuda wondered whether to throw a party to lift the mood and unite the team. Okuda watched with joy as his guests Juno and Margot happily ate the beef shashlik he had prepared. It seemed to him that both were already a little tired, and this pleased him. Maybe the evening would end soon. At this stage, he had already finished cooking the soup, and sincerely hoped that it would help everyone restore their strength after a busy day. He mentally noted that the herb really helps with hangovers and noticeably eases well-being. Margot looked at the pot with soup and recognized the dish. It was shimino soup. Okuda confidently confirmed her guess, briefly saying that she was right. It quickly occurred to him, as before, that everyone was eating with pleasure and sincerely showing it. At the end of the evening, he wished everyone good night and noted that tomorrow they would definitely meet again. The next morning he sighed with relief. The soup really helped, and everyone came to their senses. Since he needed to visit the guild, he suggested going to the city together, and they set off. And on the way, Okuda thought about his desires and realized that he really wanted to learn true magic. He recalled the moment when the sorceress, raising a tornado spell, broke the breath of a huge dragon. Then he first understood. This was wind magic, the element that had always attracted him. He decided that to master magic, a lot of training and persistent learning was needed. As in any craft, first you learn the basics, and over time, step by step, you become a master. At parting, Margot quietly said that she would like to meet again and said goodbye, and Okuda responded lightly, smiling a little. He entered the guild building and immediately stated that he wanted to learn wind magic. Dan, who was standing near the entrance, quietly nodded and confirmed that it was possible. Okuda froze with surprise upon seeing the open dojo. He had never associated this place with magic training. In his opinion, Master Kai hardly had any magical abilities, although there was a special atmosphere inside, and Dan knocked on the door and addressed a man named Han, asking him to conduct the lesson. Okuda got a little nervous upon hearing the teacher's name, and was even more surprised when he saw that Han would be teaching him, a respectable man with an artificial eye, who turned out to be a teacher of dark magic. However, Okuda sincerely and respectfully expressed his desire to learn specifically from him. He pondered how many battles and hardships this man had endured. When Han demonstrated the power of wind magic, Okuda froze with admiration. It truly impressed him, and although he himself had no experience yet, he very much wanted to follow this path. He decided to start with something simple. He imagined in his mind the very image, air gathering in a spiral and turning into a typhoon. Concentrating, he mentally repeated the words of the spell and sent magical power to create the image of the wind. After many hours of persistent training, he finally managed to activate the magic. The result was weak, clearly not enough to impress anyone, but the system still notified that he had successfully mastered the magic and unlocked a new skill called wind. Okuda firmly decided not to stop. He would continue to train and become stronger. He recalled that someday he would be able to brew potions himself to maintain his strength, and promised to devote all his energy to training. During one of the training sessions, he smiled at his faithful dog Ash, noticing how he enjoyed the wind from the spell, and suddenly saw that someone else had fallen into a trap, a blue wolf. Ash reacted in time and did not allow his master to harm the beast. Okuda realized that this wolf was of the same kind as Ash and was not aggressive at all. He understood that the animal posed no threat, released it, and quietly said that it could rest peacefully, but it was better if it did not return here again. Later that same evening, immersed in thoughts about wind magic, he suddenly realized something unexpected. With this magic, for example, you can quickly dry hair. He smiled and asked Ash if he liked that feeling. Then he looked at the bracelet on his wrist and remembered that he had not yet thanked Sarasa for this gift, so he decided to call Juno to choose an appropriate gift for her in return. He remembered that Juno lives in the same tavern where he was once helped, and since he had already been there, finding the way was not difficult. Okuda went down to the first floor of the tavern and headed to the bar counter. At that moment, the man, having barely exchanged a few words with the girl, hurriedly left. Okuda wondered if he had become an accidental obstacle here. The girl greeted him warmly. He said that his friend Juno asked which room she lives in, and the girl replied that Juno lives in room number 202. Okuda sighed with relief, went up to the second floor, reached the right door, knocked, heard no answer, and said he was coming in. The door opened, and he saw Juno. He looked exhausted and weary, so Okuda gently suggested he wash up and showed him how to do it. Juno only silently nodded, and Okuda understood that he had been through a lot, so he decided not to ask unnecessary questions. He again fixed his gaze on the bracelet, and so as not to burden Juno with conversations, began writing on the board. He suggested choosing a gift for Sarasa as a token of gratitude. Juno read the proposal and agreed. When they went outside, Okuda could not help but worry about him. He honestly admitted that he did not understand the words Juno was trying to say, but his feelings were quite obvious to him. He suddenly remembered how in the hardest moments there was always a friend nearby who just listened. Okuda decided that sometimes people do not need advice, they just want someone to say that their feelings are real. He felt that Juno had been through so much. Even without understanding his words, he clearly felt his pain, sadness, and inner struggle, and that was enough to truly understand him. At the end of the day, Juno thanked him and said goodbye. Okuda responded warmly, wished all the best, and promised that they would definitely meet again. Okuda continued to practice his wind magic aloud, apologized to Esh, explaining that he did this to make his magic stronger. Suddenly Margot appeared next to him and called him. Okuda froze in surprise and began to wonder why she was here. He figured that maybe Margot had not yet thanked for the bracelet that Sarasa gave her, and the thought flashed through his mind, how difficult it can be to understand another person's feelings. Suddenly, he remembered how together with Juno they immediately thanked Sarasa, and then Okuda asked Juno to thank him as well. After everything that happened, the very next day some government official moved into his house, and Okuda thought ironically that his home was turning into a hotel. He recalled he heard that several adventurers simply could not endure the behavior of one of the aristocrats. They left the city and moved their bases to other places. Okuda decided that something similar had happened that time at the tavern and thought that any normal person would stay as far away as possible from such a disgusting individual. He could not fall asleep from anywhere. He was overwhelmed by a feeling of fear, and he admitted it to himself. Memories flooded back about the time when even in a past life he dreamed of complete solitude. He turned off his phone and did not respond to messages, sought silence and solitude, but after some time he was drawn back to people, and he returned to conversations. The same was true with social networks. At first he deleted accounts, then restored them and started communicating again. One of the reasons he wanted to move to the village was that he was already tired of constant conversations at work. Empty fake smiles no longer warmed him, and he was sure he no longer wanted people, dreaming of living completely alone, almost without any contacts. Even finding himself in a new world, he felt that the desire to be alone had not diminished at all. It seemed to him that rare meetings and brief conversations with someone were quite enough. He felt as if he was together with Juno, Margot, and Sarasa. Having digested all this, Okuda felt that he could not be sure what if he was drawn to solitude again. He decided that a person's greatest enemy is themselves. Thoughts give no peace, and the more a person succumbs to them, the deeper they sink into their own darkness. He realized that he did not need an answer. He was simply drowning in despair. Feeling like a fool for inventing unnecessary worries again, he thought that since he started a new life here, his old artificial smile had finally disappeared. He felt as if he had found a true treasure, and his heart was filled with peace for the first time in a long while. These unusual relationships with 3 comrades became extremely important to him, and he was sure they would stay close for life. The next morning, just after finishing the morning work in the forge, he was already about to prepare breakfast and call the others when suddenly representatives of the nobility entered his house. The appearance of aristocrats was a complete surprise, and Okuda immediately understood that something unusual was happening. He wondered, does anyone really believe that the same team can capture a dungeon without proper preparation? To him, this seemed completely unrealistic. He noticed that when a person is furious to the extreme, their face miraculously becomes completely calm. Unfortunately, Okuda knew that at such moments he had to put on a mask and smile. A nobleman named Berun approached him and addressed him by name. Okuda instantly became wary and began to guess what this man might want from him. Badaran spoke in his native language and did not understand it himself. Suddenly horror, Byron had one hand cut off. The wounds in Baron's soul, though slowly, were healing little by little. He believed that in time everything would inevitably fall into place and improve. Memories of his past frightened him back, then he was completely out of his mind. After that terrible tragedy that once happened, he also went mad and lost the ability to think clearly, but now he was sure he was no longer insane. Finally, Baron felt how strong and unbearable the pain in the human heart could be, and understood that the loss of close friends and injuries was one of the hardest trials. Sharp pain gripped his chest every time he remembered those who died because he did nothing, and these thoughts made him almost want to attack his past self. A sea of regret for all the terrible deeds had accumulated in him, and when he realized his guilt, his whole body began to tremble. Once seeing his son making decisions and acting on his own, Shakara could not hold back tears of joy. Heinrich, his son, took over the city council and handled this important matter excellently. All these taxes and paperwork seemed like a complete tangle to Baron, but his son, the true leader Henry, turned out to be a worthy and wonderful person. Rana was increasingly convinced that he was unworthy to be a ruler. He thought everything happened because of him. No one knew, but he began to fear others' looks, as if everyone condemned him, and the anxiety grew day by day. Before he did everything at random, feeling no pressure, just following the first thought. Now a heavy burden of responsibility had fallen on him that could break him, but he sincerely wanted the city to develop, to be alive and joyful. Perhaps the peasants thought it would be better if he remained in his madness, but he understood this would change nothing for the better. Locking himself in a room would be easy, but it would not help him fulfill his duty to the people. He remembered every resident, both those he knew and those he had hurt with his actions. Gathering the last crumbs of courage, he promised Shirak that he would do everything possible to revive the city. His body still trembled when meeting people, but he had recovered enough to respond when called by name. One day Shiraku approached him and apologized. It turned out that his son Heinrich had raised the bounty tax for killing monsters, and had also formed an alliance with the guild to jointly solve all the city's problems. Baron thought it would be good if his son continued to govern the city, but Shiraku hoped that he would agree to this. And in this realization, he felt all the pain he had caused Shiraku. Run felt sharp shame for once forcing the guildmaster to bow his head before him, and now clearly understood how deeply and strongly this had hurt Shiraku. Swallowing his emotions, he bowed to Shiraku and apologized to him. Baron began to think more clearly. He felt that Shiraku was already worried about him, but he knew one cannot stop halfway. He honestly admitted that he had made many mistakes in life, and one of the worst was forcing others to bow their heads before him, and he had only recently realized this truth. Reflecting, he bitterly understood that he still owed apologies to many people. Among them were innocent adventurers whom he had once unjustly thrown behind bars, and he suspected that many of them now hated him. Because of his actions, the city was mired in problems, so Shiraku suggested Baron leave now, and Baron realized that this was truly the best option. Over time, it seemed to him more and more often that Henry was beginning to avoid communication with him. He could not understand what was on his son's mind, and feared that he would raise taxes, but Henry firmly replied that the guild itself must take care of the city's security. They made this decision together after a conversation, and Baron was not sure whether his son did it out of respect for him, but he knew he could not understand all his motives, and he felt that he had failed both as a father and as a man. If his son ever decided to follow his path and use his power for evil to cause pain to others, Baron was ready to intervene and guide him on the right path. This was his main duty as a father. He, Lester von Baron, although not fully recovered yet, could already calmly walk around his estates and their surroundings. Baron went through all the districts and apologized to the residents. If he could, he wanted to establish relations with everyone, but in the end, he realized how difficult it really is to receive true forgiveness. That is why he made every possible effort. Byron understood if he locked himself in the room again and stayed aside, nothing would change, so he asked the butler to take care of the horse named Melty, and the butler agreed, assuring that he would do everything. Byron felt a reliable guardian nearby whom he could trust, so he sincerely thanked Tony for the protection, and Tony in response assured that he would continue to stand guard. Baron spoke confidently. As a true nobleman, he would fulfill his duty. He promised, from now on he would do everything possible to atone for all his sins. Suddenly a monster appeared, and the surroundings became tense. Shiraku loudly shouted Baron's name, worried about him. Nearby Juno asked confusedly where to run because it was completely unclear what to do, and Okuda briefly replied that he understood everything and already realized what danger they were in, so he used magic to create a protection under which everyone could hide. Okuda was overwhelmed by devastating fear. His legs seemed to refuse to obey, and he only hoped that the monster would not notice him. Meanwhile, Sarasa was bandaging Byron's wound and encouraging him, constantly repeating that everything would be fine, as if convincing herself and everyone around with these words. One day Okuda, trying to reinforce this thought, said that they managed to survive. Juno looked at him, worriedly, care shone in her eyes. He nodded and quietly said that he was fine. Inside he knew, although he looked calm on the outside, he was actually powerless and could do nothing, and at the same time he felt that he had an urgent matter to accomplish. Okuda rushed to prepare a potion, anxiously hoping that it would be needed. He understood that even with magical help and potion, restoring the severed hand would be too difficult, and only the fact that no one died during that attack somewhat calmed him. He smelled his own blood and went to wash, but noticed that the fog was getting thicker, and this was supposed to happen during the day. Later he came to the guild building and made a fervent request to Dan to raise the reward for the task. He recalled that the guild had already issued a request to destroy this monster, but deliberately raised the reward to lure stronger and more experienced adventurers. It turned out that the enemy, initially thought to be an ordinary creature, was actually a young dragon, and if it had attacked Okuda personally, he would definitely have died. Inner tension gripped him as he thought about how much longer he would have to live in constant fear and wait for new attacks. Returning home, he checked if he was really alone and tried to convince himself that no one was around. He thought about visiting Margot, but decided that no place would protect him from a possible attack. Death would be inevitable wherever he was. He decided to stay home and distract himself with something else. Various thoughts swirled in his head, and he himself did not know whether to rejoice or grieve over the thick fog that covered the house. Okuda tried to cope with fear by drawing, but his hands kept trembling, and he could not concentrate. In the morning he realized that he had not closed his eyes all night. Seeing a cheerful dog named Ash, he thought that maybe he should have gone to Margot and drunk to excess. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice at the door. It was Margot and Juno. Okuda opened the door and honestly admitted, this unexpected visit scared him very much. Margot held up a sheet with a drawn dragon, then suddenly tore the paper. This surprised Okuda greatly. Sighing with relief, he felt that the danger was behind him. Later, reviewing all the events in his mind, he concluded that the huge lizard they had considered a monster from the forest dungeon had actually flown in from distant lands and just happened to be nearby. It turned out that experienced adventurers had already defeated it in another city. Peace had returned to the city, and his soul felt lighter, but he understood that new monsters could appear and attack in the future. When he saw the new creature, he immediately understood it was a monster and noticed that it was lost in the fog and had accidentally ended up near his house. He immediately began to assess the situation the system showed. It was a battle bull, a monster resembling a cow that lives near water in the Lancaster area, and Okuda noticed that it was indeed a bull, although at first he had mistaken it for a cow. When the fear receded, hunger pounced on him. He decided that Margot and Juno were to blame for everything. They had been too kind to him. Perhaps it happened because he had seen with his own eyes how a nobleman's hand was cut off. He grumbled indignantly that all the cooking preparations had fallen solely on his shoulders. But he noticed the thick mist had already parted. Okuda suggested arranging a real meat feast: steaks, matsuneb, smoked meat, liver, and a bunch of other meat dishes. The friends settled at the table, began to have dinner, and enjoy themselves. Then they, with wide-open eyes and hearts full of delight, looked at the night sky. Okuda noticed that Margot was snoring so loudly, and suddenly remembered the shimano soup that he had forgotten to drink. He looked at his friends and immediately noticed they looked tired. He realized that now he could be frank with them, and felt that between them there had formed such a relationship where they could call each other best friends. The soup did not help at all to get rid of the consequences of yesterday's drinking. He reheated it once more and thought that the herbs in the soup were really very strong. When they gathered again, he asked his friends to go with him to the forest to gather herbs. They agreed, and he sincerely thanked them. He was surprised and with a slight pleasure realized that even in the forest full of dangers, his heart remained calm. They gathered a pile of herbs, and he smiled. He was satisfied with the result. Suddenly Margot shouted, calling Juno and Okuda. He responded instantly and noticed monsters approaching. Okuda saw a blue wolf fighting another monster. Then he decided to help from afar and started shooting with a bow. Okuda's level jumped to 14. He did not want to take the loot from another, but it was his arrow that became decisive. Later he sincerely thanked his friends for the help and suggested submitting an application to the guild to conquer the younger dragon in case of possible danger, and Margot agreed with a smile. Once again Okuda thanked him and said goodbye. He listened to the buzzing of beetles, and it gave him peace. Thoughts about the future made him want to cry. Okuda did not understand why he suddenly cried. He had not even consumed alcohol today. He remembered saying that he loved solitude, but suddenly felt the warmth that once warmed his heart is impossible to forget. When everyone left, loneliness hit him especially hard. Okuda felt that all good things eventually end. fun, singing, the pleasant evening breeze, and the buzzing of insects. Fear gripped his chest. It seemed this lonely night would never end, and he did not understand at all what was happening to him. Perhaps it happened due to recent stress or a few overly tense situations. He took a cup of herbal tea to calm down. Although he understood why he felt this way, he did not want to accept this truth. Okuda, I realized that I have become an adult who cannot get rid of loneliness. Waking up in the morning, he felt dizziness in his head and heaviness in his body. Warmth enveloped him, and he realized that he was truly ill. He tried to prepare food for Kurtzi, but his strength left him. Eventually, he lost consciousness. Shiraku, the head of the Adventurers Guild in Leicester, noticed that recently the city ruler nobleman Byron had begun to treat adventurers poorly, and complaints were pouring in through his employee den. So as the guild leader, Shiraku decided to speak with Byron personally. His position opened the way to the city council. The guild promised to destroy monsters and capture the dungeons, and Shiraku told Byron in detail about all the nuances and risks of this matter. But Byron continued to insist on subduing the basilisk. Q, of course, tried to convince him, but in vain. He could no longer just stand and watch so many adventurers die in vain. Moreover, Byron did not allow hiring new people. Only Juno, Margot, and Okuda could overcome the cockatrice. Okuda, a healing master, knew how to treat petrification. There was also a trio of fighters who defeated the serpent and together with Lester, earned the title of the strongest. And the martial arts teacher Kai could also give it a worthy rebuff. No one had any idea that they would have to face several cockatrices at once. They were able to escape only thanks to Okuda. Shiraku was immensely grateful to Okuda for this. They were completely disgraced. They offered only 5 gold coins. No adventurer would risk their life for such a trifle. Dan looked at Shiraku with an empty gaze and could not help, but the honor of the guild was more important, so he gave his savings and rummaged through the guild treasury to collect the required amount. After this, Shiraku advised Berun to surrender. He persuaded him again and again, until he began to go bald. Then suddenly a hole appeared inside the stomach, and its traces began to show on the head. Finally, Berun ordered to gather the same people who were here last time. To disturb Keigo again, Okudo and Shiraku bowed their heads more than once and apologized for the unexpectedness. Berun ignored all requests, and Shiraku bitterly regretted that he was such an inept guildmaster. When Birion dismounted to invite him, the younger dragon attacked him and tore off his right arm. Shirakud rushed to protect Berun from the monster and eventually drove it away. After this, Beethoven hardly left his room according to the butler's testimony. He sat there constantly, and food was simply left under the door. He even began talking to the horse statue, and this greatly shook life in the city. Then Berun's son Henry spoke with his father, and soon became the heir of the family himself. Henry is the complete opposite of his father, very intelligent, and this finally calmed the anxious heart of Shiraku. Berun, a nobleman who lost his right arm during a clash with a small dragon, since then began to deeply fear the world around him. Fear crushed him. He locked himself in his room and flatly refused to go outside. Not wanting to be so lonely anymore, he ordered his favorite horse Melty to be brought to his room. His strange behavior made the people around whisper and suspect that something was wrong with Byron. He felt as if they were mocking him, and this only increased his anxiety and suspicion. He began to fear even birds and insects because he thought everyone was laughing at him and wanted to punish each one for it. He almost stopped participating in city affairs and avoided people because meetings caused him strong agitation and trembling in the only remaining hand. Due to the loss of his right arm, it was difficult for him to eat, and voices sounded in his head convincing him that he deserved his suffering. Berun did not consider himself insane, but honestly admitted he was afraid of everything that surrounded him. The servants began to treat him coldly, and insomnia was eating him up. He dreamed of simply disappearing from this world, cursing everything around. He could not even remember when he last woke up feeling like a completely different person. In these difficult times, Guildmaster Shiraku took care of Berun. He found a person who could lift the petrification curse from Melty, and this gave Berun the strength to live on. He began to leave the room during the day again, spend time next to Melty, and gradually feel the taste of happiness once more. His sleep problems gradually receded, but it was still hard for him to look the servants in the eyes. A quiet, caring voice said that it had brought canned peach and wished a speedy recovery. Okuda thanked her and called her mother. Okuda woke up and with terrible clarity realized everything that had just happened was only a dream, not reality. He immediately felt that the fever had finally subsided, and from that he felt so light at heart, as if a burden had been lifted. He anxiously noticed that he had lain unconscious for several days after his strength left him, and he fainted from exhaustion. That day he was busy, feeding the chickens and apologizing to them for not preparing food earlier, and then from fatigue simply collapsed. Okuda added with relief that he was already feeling better, and even lucky no client had appeared during the illness. but in his soul he bitterly admitted to himself that he was terribly afraid to die alone when no one would be nearby, and recalled the concept of kodokashi, it is when a person dies alone, and their body is found only after a long time. With sadness in his soul, he remembered his mother, with whom he could no longer talk. His heart tightened at the thought that she probably thinks he simply left home and abandoned everything. Okuda felt intense pain, thinking about how valuable the people around him had become after everything that had happened to him. He hoped that Margot and the others would be fine, even if he was not there, blamed himself for selfishness, and admitted that although the fever had passed, he still needed to rest, so he decided to spend the day calmly, allow himself to relax and make some potions. While he was watching the potion preparation, his gaze stopped on a familiar figure. It was Juno. Okuda immediately recognized him and thought that he had not seen this man for a long time. He learned that Juno had offered him to take part in the conquest, explained that he had just recovered from illness, and due to fatigue and general weakness, Okuda politely declined the offer. Juno calmly accepted the refusal, turned around and said goodbye, promising to return tomorrow. Okuda wished him luck and watched him leave, and after a short conversation, he again pondered his symptoms and remembered that Juno had spoken about a doctor in the city, so he decided that potions do not always help with fever, and it is better to go to the hospital after all. Later, checking his supplies, Okuda noticed that he had managed to make quite a few potions at that moment. Juno approached him again and addressed him by name. Okuda asked, somewhat surprised, if he had just returned from hunting because he looked tired. Seeing Juno's cart with medicinal plants and food, he decided that Juno had first stopped by the city and did not immediately go on errands, but Juno explained that he had brought all this specifically for Okuda. Okuda was sincerely touched and thanked him, although he could not repay Juno with anything except his potions. He invited Juno to stay overnight and happily thought that in these difficult times there was a friend nearby. Juno told that while Okuda was sick, so much had happened. Okuda finally decided to end his laziness, but first wanted to have a good sleep. In the morning, Juno said goodbye to Okuda, and he smiled and sincerely wished him luck. After a good sleep, Okuda felt much better and decided to stretch a little. Iron appeared, the same nobleman whom Okuda had previously considered a fool. This time he came alone, without the company of adventurers, and Okuda decided not to tell him that the three of them had planned to go to the forest. Byron bowed low and apologized to Okuda, which greatly surprised him. Okuda could hardly believe his ears and mentally asked himself if he was imagining it. Soon Baron handed him a heavy bag, and Okuda, surprised by its weight, felt there were about 500 gold coins inside, so he wondered what Baron wanted to achieve with this. He thought it was like compensation for previous favors, and had to admit such an action was unexpected and rare, and recalling their last meeting, he noticed that Byron seemed to have changed for the better and become an honorable man. Seeing sincerity in his actions, he believed that he was truly repentant, and now, with the threat from the nobleman gone, Okuda had no reason to refuse the gift, so he decided to start small to treat Baron to something tasty. In his house, everything seemed familiar and cozy, as if the walls remembered his footsteps. He recalled that smoked meat had always been a favorite dish, especially among the lords. When Tony, the nobleman's guard, informed him that now his son had become the master instead of him, Okuda realized that many changes had occurred during his illness. He set about cooking. He fried a whole herring with garlic, salt, and spices, believing that such a dish would definitely please people from high society, so he cooked without sparing effort. Byron's facial expression during the tasting was unexpected, and Okuda felt that all the efforts were not in vain. Then a little dog named Ash approached him looking for a treat, and Okuda promised that there would be something tasty for her too, joking that she should also eat vegetables. Noticing where the noblemen were heading together with Tony, he was surprised to realize they were going not to the city, but towards the forest and the stables. He tried to hold them back, but it drained his strength. They looked like drunken peasants, and he thought that when they woke up, it would be worth treating them to shimano soup. In the morning, as expected, he found them in a miserable state, and although it was anticipated, it still shocked him. He said goodbye to them, wishing them to take care of themselves. Finally, when he had already gathered a solid sum, it was time to think about how to wisely manage the money. He went to a familiar merchant to talk about future investments, and in the city he met Margot, Juno, and Sarah. They enthusiastically discussed the idea of installing crossbows and building stone walls around his estate, because stone is much stronger than earth, so he said he also wanted a bath and a proper bedroom, and he still had plenty of money, so he complained that he was tired of living in a chicken coop. They agreed they would continue working together. Friends helped him arrange meetings with craftsmen and building material suppliers. He also visited Dr. Kishu-sensei to make sure medical help would be at hand, and although he did not know how developed medicine was here, the very fact that there were doctors pleased him, so he entrusted Sarasa to bring home everything he bought, both materials and food. Okuda decided to smoke meat, a simple, warm sign of gratitude to his friends for their help. When he finally realized that there was no going back to the hermit's life, he thanked them from the bottom of his heart. A few days later, he enthusiastically inspected the protective wall, the bed, and the bedroom. Everything was already ready. He called his new home a true fortress, a dream that had finally come true. Okuda hoped that now wild animals, such as snakes or flying lizards, would no longer see him as prey. He sincerely thanked everyone who helped him. Margot approached him and loudly exclaimed, "Hello." Okuda smiled and suggested celebrating the completion of the construction by inviting him for a drink. Margot asked if Sarasa was here, but he replied that she was not here. After thinking a little, Okuda decided that Margot was probably avoiding meeting her. Margot raised a glass and called for a toast to the completion of the construction. Okuda suddenly remembered that he had not yet had a chance to taste Shimino's soup again, recalled how he once walked with his best friend until dawn, and he thought that it was a great reason for a celebration. He realized neither of them really knew how to be adults. The next morning he woke up with a broken head and was sure refusing Shimino's soup really turned out to be a fatal mistake. Okuda lay on the floor and thought sadly. He had become lazy again. Several days had passed since his house was finally ready, and when the stone walls were erected, he felt the long-awaited safety and was finally able to relax. But as soon as the feeling of danger disappeared, he had only 3 strength left for daily tasks instead of 10. He still had gold coins, so he didn't have to worry about work. He could sleep and wake up whenever he wanted. It seemed that the dreams he had carried in his heart for so long were finally beginning to come true. Maybe he rested too much yesterday. It was still very early, the sun hadn't even appeared, and he was already awake. That morning he woke up first and opened his eyes. Even the animals around were still quietly sleeping. In these precious moments of silence and peace, he decided to gather his thoughts. He almost jumped for joy. Juno's feelings for Sarasa turned out to be mutual. From the outside, it seemed that Sarasa also felt some sympathy for Margot. Okuda wondered if Juno had already stopped trying to please her. It would be easier if he found another girl, but Okuda knew. Juno was a good guy and definitely did not lack attention from girls. As for Margot, he continued to turn away from Sarasa's persistent attempts to attract his attention. It seemed as if success was very close. Okuda was still emerging in Runham's memory. Losing a hand could have been one of the reasons for his recent behavior. The gold he gave to Okuda as a sign of apology turned out to be extremely useful. It went towards building a stone wall, and it really saved the situation. He decided that there was no point in holding a grudge against Baron anymore. He noticed Byron's son, who now ruled the city. Margot and others whispered that he abused his power. Okuda did not seek to communicate with the aristocrats, but was ready to intervene if something serious happened. He seemed to see before him everyone he had met. Secretary Dan, Guildmaster Shiraku, Kaizensei, and Han-sensei, all of them taught him many useful skills. 3 travelers, a stonemason, and a master, they were the ones who gave him a home with stone walls. Later, he met Dr. Keisha, Byron's guard named Tony, Baker Taylor, and many others. So many people cared about him. In his past life, he only survived and had no time to think about others. Later, he realized, no matter how much a person denies it, living without the support of others is impossible, and although he resisted until the very end, there were things he really did not want to forget. For him, his dog Ash was always the sweetest and fluffiest creature in the world, and he sincerely wanted it to always be that way. The days were getting shorter, autumn was already approaching, and winter would follow. With the first snows, he wanted to ask Margot to make a fireplace. The thought of taking a bath and watching the snow fall warmed him. The last few days had been boring, so he decided, after sleeping, it was worth taking a bath. In the morning, Okuda suddenly remembered that he had left his fishing rod somewhere, was sure it was here, rummaged, and finally found it. The rod was completely intact, so he baited the hook with a local worm and went fishing. When he approached the river, he was struck there were no monsters anywhere around. For the first time in a long time, he was finally able to sit calmly by the water, and suddenly the fishing rod twitched. He caught something. The fish turned out to be ayu, so he did not hesitate, decided to taste it. From this fish, sashimi could be made, if only it did not have parasites. Finally, the fish processing skills he acquired in Japan came in handy. He carefully began to cut the fish, then tried it. As expected, the fish was very tasty, and the system confirmed that it was indeed delicious. He could not decide how best to prepare it, marinate, fry, or make sashimi. He wanted to catch more fish but eventually fell asleep. Waking up, he rejoiced friends nearby, and everything was fine with them. When Okuda felt it was time to finish fishing and move on, he got up, called his horse Rosinide, and rode away. When he turned home and lit up with joy, he saw that his friends had already come. In the room, there was pre-holiday. Buslivrion was busy waiting for the celebration. He was lucky. He He had just caught a lot of fresh fish, so the evening promised to be especially tasty, and he suggested raising glasses because such meetings deserve real treats and a warm dinner. The friendly cooking has begun. Where he got the fish from, carefully rubbed garlic, showed where to put it, cut sashimi himself, remembering that no one in the city had served raw fish yet, and eagerly awaited whether the guests would like this Japanese dish. When everything was ready, he joyfully announced that the food was served and called everyone to the table. First, they brought shiitake fish grilled with salt, and then served sashimi. Sarasa looked at the new dish with surprise, and Okuda showed how to properly squeeze lemon juice and emphasized how delicious sashimi can become if served correctly. From the expressions on their faces, he immediately understood. They were tasting this for the first time, and he felt pleased to see how much they liked it. And then he noticed Juno looked a little upset. He smiled and offered more assuring that the taste of this food would definitely restore his strength. Juno was a bit confused and mixed up the dishes called sashimi shiitake, which made things a bit awkward, but Okuda pretended nothing happened and offered everyone drinks again so as not to spoil the festive mood. Feeling the air around calm down, he decided to lift the mood and greeted Margot and Sarasa. Their tender acts from yesterday had melted hearts so much that everyone thought a wedding was about to happen, and the newlyweds smiled, confirmed his guess, and sincerely thanked him for the kind words. He almost fell when he learned that in 2 days a wedding was to take place at his home, and only close relatives were to be invited. Okuda noticed that Juno looked especially depressed. But when he looked at the guest list and saw the name Elsa, Juno's girlfriend, he was confused. It turned out Juno already had a beloved. So all the conversations from yesterday with support and sympathy turned out to be in vain, but he couldn't be angry. On the contrary, he sincerely rejoiced for his friend, and at the end of the evening Sarasa thanked him for everything, and they said goodbye until the next meeting. Okuda was left alone and pondered how to celebrate his best friend's wedding. There were only 2 days left until the celebration, so he rushed to plan bath, entertainment, food, and decided to start with preparing dishes, because everyone loved fish, so Okuda went fishing and even sacrificed his chickens. There was very little time left until the wedding, and it was in the morning that the fishing was a great success. The catch was simply wonderful. But when he was preparing yakitori, he put all his attention and soul into each piece. He was especially proud of the breaded chicken. He considered it his best dish. Only fresh fish remained to be prepared. When almost everything was ready, finally, the main culprits of the celebration arrived: Margot and Sarasa. Juno approached them and introduced his companion, Lady Elsa. Okuda greeted her warmly. Something inside whispered to him. He had seen her before. She was the daughter of the tavern owner where Juno lived. Suddenly, a flood of thoughts rushed through his mind. He realized that Juno was lucky. Elsa was not only beautiful, but also kind. He sincerely rejoiced for his friend, because he knew what hardships he had gone through. After greeting Junon, he immediately began the final preparations. Suddenly, like thunder out of a clear sky, the son of Berun appeared. When he appeared, everyone held their breath in surprise. Okuda noticed that he was meeting such a man for the first time. When Margot paled at the sight of the guest, it became obvious. His arrival promised nothing good. He did not yet fully understand what was happening, but he was sure only a true savage could ruin such a special day. The blue wolf, a proud hunter of the dense wild forest, independent and stern. He was born into a pack led by a wise and strong leader, to whom he felt respect, loyalty, and true unity. One day a man burst into their lives, strange and terribly strong, with abilities the blue wolf had never seen. He was an important figure among his people and possessed incomprehensible magic. In a brutal fight he defeated the wolf leader, leaving him no chance, took his cub, and simply walked away, leaving the pack broken and confused. The wolf sharply realized, if he had attacked that day, he would definitely have died without preparation, and without any idea of the enemy's magical power, he had no chance. When the leader was gone, the pack was left leaderless, and the fate of the little wolf cub was in the hands of a human. At first, this alarmed everyone, but later the blue wolves noticed. The human did not harm the cub, but on the contrary protected and cared for him as if he were his own child. The world in which they lived was ruthless. Only the strongest survived here, and no rules could change that. But even in the heart of a devoted beast, another feeling arises: respect. Realizing that fighting was futile, the blue wolves chose another path of loyalty, and since then quietly watched from afar over the puppy and his new protector. They did not intervene directly, coming to help only when danger threatened him. Out of respect for the puppy and his owner, they occasionally scared away wild beasts that could harm them, but suddenly something unexpected happened. One of the blue she-wolves came too close to the camp and fell under the influence of strange magic. He lost control and was wounded. When he was ready to accept his fate, suddenly before him appeared the puppy, grown into an adult dog, who shielded the wolf with himself. Not even thinking about his own safety, the beast's heart beat faster. It was a real shock, because in a world ruled by the law, kill or be killed, such a kind act is a great rarity. This man, so strange, almost a foreign wolf, not only did not turn away, he helped him with his wounds and carefully took care of him, and this once again proved. Before them stood not just a man, but someone special, deeper, and nobler. One day the man took the puppy and went to the lake to fish, and the wolves, as always, guarded them from afar. Their peace was suddenly disturbed by a bear that appeared with the intent to attack. Then the blue wolves rushed into battle. They fought with all their might until they drove the monster away. When they returned from the fight, a touching scene unfolded before them. The exhausted but unharmed puppy peacefully slept in the man's arms, and even the stern heart of the forest warrior melted at this sight. When the wolves returned to their camp, there was no one there. The people had disappeared, but they left fresh fish and a wooden bowl with some potion as if a sign of gratitude. It was a sign. The man understood wolves well, knew how they could help, and sincerely appreciated it. The wolf admitted defeat not in battle, but before the humanity and kindness of this unusual man. Since then, although much time has passed, the blue wolves still vigilantly guard the place where this man lives with his ward, sincerely hoping that the little wolf cub will grow strong, wise, and just because the blue wolves are not just beasts, but intelligent creatures of the forest. Loyal, proud, and capable of true feelings, Elsa runs a cozy tavern and a lively bar in Leicester, where the paths of travelers, craftsmen, and adventurers constantly cross. Sensitive and practical, she created not just an establishment, a true home for those who cannot afford housing. Here especially find refuge poor adventurers who earn by dangerous work and constantly risk their lives. Elsa's Tavern offers the most affordable housing in the district, so for many it is not just a lodging, but a place where one can find warmth, care, food, and human compassion. Among the regular visitors of this place is Juno, a daredevil with a good heart and unbreakable will. Elsa knew him and his friend Sarasa since childhood, and for many years she felt something more than friendship for Juno, which gradually grew into true love. But Juno's heart was always devoted to another Sarasa, and Elsa felt it immediately, because lovers sense even the slightest sympathy directed not at them. Quiet but sharp pain from realizing this love, Sarasa did not return Juno's feelings. She loved Margot, a master blacksmith and skilled merchant who worked with metal like an artist with paints, and although it was bitter, Elsa had to admit that they really suited each other. Meanwhile, Juno suffered terribly. Love literally tore him apart from the inside. He lost weight, became gloomy, and distanced himself from everyone. The one who always relied on strength was now wasting away before their eyes, and Elsa could not just stand aside. She worried, brought food, and persuaded him to eat at least a little. Sometimes he pushed her away with words, even rude ones, but she still stayed nearby, endured, and did not leave. Her love demanded nothing in return. It simply was. Every morning Elsa stood before the mirror and examined her freckles, which once seemed cute to her. She felt that Sarasa was attractive not only outwardly, but also in soul, a kind and worthy person. But despite all this, Elsa's heart was torn by jealousy, bitterness, and a burning desire to be in the place of the one to whom Juno dedicates his soul. And then everything changed. When Elsa was almost giving up, Juno said exactly what she had been waiting for. He asked her to be his girlfriend, and his words broke down all her inner walls, causing tears to roll down her cheeks. They sincerely talked about how Margot once was able to release the spirit of his late wife Isabella, and Juno found the strength to forget his feelings for Sarasa. Elsa, of course, still worries a little because of memories of past love, but now there are no secrets between them. He knows that she loves him, and because of this she shines with happiness. It was the happiest day of her life. For Margot and Sarah's wedding, Elsa dressed especially beautifully. She chose her favorite dress, wore the shoes she had saved for an important event, and added jewelry and earrings that Juno had once given her. She did not cover her freckles with makeup. Juno said he liked them, so she decided to remain herself and accepted herself as she is. The wedding took place at the house of Juno's friend Okuti, and Elsa recalled how once he had peeked into her tavern, with charisma, hair as black as night, and a kind gaze that she remembered for a long time, and with that cute puppy that immediately won her heart. Now she is happy because she sees him again. In her heart lives a light excitement, joy, and anticipation of something bright and beautiful, and with love, faith in the future, and her own confidence, she steps towards the new day. In the city of Leicester, the new ruler became Lord Henry, the son of the previous ruler, whom everyone still remembered for his cruelty. To step out of his father's shadow, Henry zealously won the trust of the townspeople, connecting both influential and ordinary people around himself, and his positions became stronger. People began to call him wise, and this pleased him. He felt power because his decisions shaped the life around. To stay in power, Henry raised taxes to an unbearable level and forced people to work for him to complete exhaustion. But when his father tried to regain power by raising taxes in favor of the Adventurers Guild and the army, Henry thwarted these plots and again put the city under his control, and feeling that all problems were behind, he pondered further plans. When Henry studied the city's economy, he became interested in Margot's weapons shop, where they sold daggers of fire and water. Their sale revived the local economy. To grab some profit for himself, Henry decided to take Margot and his affairs under his control. But his people whispered Margot had stopped selling such weapons, and this led to the thought that he had some secret source. Seeing that the shop was closed, Henry, with a clenched heart, saw how Margot with companions got into a carriage and left the city. He decided that the place they were heading to might lead to the origin of these unusual daggers, so he ordered 4 subordinates to follow them. Henry decided to make Margot pay, and on top of that, to get double profit. Okuda stood in shock at everything that was happening and tried to understand what was going on. Suddenly, he noticed a stranger who had entered his house without permission and immediately became indignant. Okuda rushed to call security, but it did not help. Realizing that arguing with an influential person was pointless, he sighed and decided to ease the tension with sashimi, offering the uninvited guest a plate and inviting him to try it. At that very moment, Biryon appeared and addressed Henry, and Okuda suddenly realized that stranger was Biryon's son. Okuda suddenly understood that their quarrel arose from different views within the family. Since today was a special day, he asked everyone to calm down and listen to him carefully. Biryon tasted the sashimi and was pleasantly surprised by its flavor. Margot confirmed that it was indeed sashimi. Okuda sincerely rejoiced that the dish was liked and suggested leaving some for the other guests. Realizing that the more people, the merrier, he suggested inviting everyone to Margot and Sarasa's wedding, and Henry gladly agreed to come to the celebration. Margot sincerely thanked Okuda for his help, and he calmly replied that it was no problem at all. Okuda noticed that he had not expected such a large number of helpers and decided that now was not the time for disputous. Preparations for the celebration were in full swing, and finally, the long-awaited moment had come. Biryon immediately turned to Margot and Sarasa when they entered the hall. Okuda noticed that he had almost never seen Margot in a jacket, and the moon-colored dress gently emphasized Sarah's beauty. Margot and Sarasa exchanged vows and put on wedding rings. The guests joyfully congratulated them. Okuda said he had never seen such a wedding in his life, and around, as if not noticing it, everyone was smiling. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and everyone instantly rushed to celebrate. Okuda brought out sashimi and chicken and invited the guests to help themselves. 2 men were engaged in strange art, and it confused Okuda. He recalled how once, when he was a merchant, at similar celebrations, they arranged games with stockings on the head, and that memory gave him goosebumps. He was glad that in this world there were no such competitions, but he was worried that there would be no wedding song at the ceremony. Okuda went on stage and announced that he would now sing a song. As soon as he began, it became clear how anxious and lonely he was, and the song was about how friends gradually drift apart, find their own path in life, and become, as they themselves said, henpecked husbands. Okuda realized, even without knowing the language, one can feel the essence of the song with the heart, and after the performance, he warmly congratulated the young couple. After the party, Sarasa and Elsa said goodbye and promised to meet again, and Okuda also said goodbye to them and sincerely wished them all the best. Margot, Sarasa, and Elsa went home, and the rest of the guests stayed. They were quite tipsy. Okuda took everything under his control, barely moving the drunken guests, scolding them for their behavior and even threatening to throw them into the blast furnace for such a night. Later, he felt a pleasant night breeze, and suddenly all that fuss seemed to him just a dream. Looking back at everything that had happened since he found himself in this world, Okuda realized people often contradict themselves, drift apart from each other, and gradually lead themselves to extinction. Despite all this, he still managed to find friends with whom he wanted to share the brightest moments of life: Margot, Juno, Sarasa, Elsa, and of course, Ash, the sweetest creature in the world. He noticed that everyone around was enchanted by the smiles of the newlyweds, and he himself was too. It was like a circle of happiness, at the center of which shone Margot and Sarasa. Okuda said he had never seen anything like it in Japan. He pondered, words can be both a sharp blade that wounds and a mirror that shows the truth. Okuda honestly admitted that he used to avoid this and always carried everything on his own, not relying on others. But in a world where no one speaks Japanese, and every day you have to risk your life fighting monsters, the light of the blue moon seemed to fall straight into his soul, and he wondered if it was all a dream, because then all contradictions would seem understandable. He felt as if he could finally be sincere with others, so he decided not to rush and enjoy what he had, just keep moving forward in life and look forward to new challenges that tomorrow would bring with interest. A smile burst out of him. He realized that he himself had once been a contradictory person. Okuda sighed and suggested postponing the cleaning until tomorrow. Today it was better just to rest, because his friends were too noisy. He lived by making others happy, and now it gave him even more joy. The day after the wedding, Okuda took up wind magic training again. He greedily wanted to become even stronger. While others were still recovering from the celebrations, he had already returned to his usual affairs. Suddenly Esh barked loudly and immediately caught his attention. Okuda turned around and a huge snake appeared before him. Realizing there was no time for thought or help, he instantly sprang into action. Okuda cast the spell Piercing Arrow at the snake, but it had no effect. Realizing the monster had no visible weak spots, he immediately used the scanning skill to detect vulnerabilities. The system notified that Okuda's level had risen, and his scanning skill reached level 2, and he learned. The snake has a special ability, Deadly Poison, which corrodes almost everything it touches, but the snake itself is not protected from toxins, so Okuda decided to use its poison against it with the help of the Wind Gust spell. At the most crucial moment, a blue wolf appeared, lunged at the snake and distracted it, and Okuda realized the chance for a counterattack had come. He fixed his gaze on the snake, trying to guess when it would release its poisonous breath. As soon as the snake opened its jaws, Okuda swiftly used the spell Wind Gust and turned the poison back directly at the monster. The snake began to curl up, and several scales fell off, revealing a weak spot. Okuda did not waste his chance, and with one decisive sword strike, finally defeated his opponent. After the battle, the system informed Okuda his level had risen to 15. He sincerely thanked the Blue Wolf for help at the most crucial moment and made sure it was all right. Later, when Yuno learned about Okuda's deed, he simply froze in surprise and did not try to hide it at all. Okuda, still a bit stunned by what had happened, together with Juno, cleaned up the mess on the battlefield and gave the snake's body to the local butcher. Soon Elsa appeared. She came to ask how Juno was feeling after the celebration. Okuda noticed that she was dissatisfied and thought it was because Juno had left her alone. He hoped they would manage to reconcile. Looking back at recent events, Okuda pondered what could be made from snake skin, and he was also worried that a snake had appeared in these parts. He decided that there were too many monsters in the dungeon again, and that driving them out alone might not be enough. Okuda realized that this time he was just lucky, and without weapons it could have ended differently, so he thought about how to further improve his skills and magical abilities. Okuda asked Kaisensei and Hansensei to train him. Thoughts about wind magic pushed him to a simple solution. More training and experience were needed. Okuda fervently believed that by mastering the basic skills perfectly, he could conquer more complex magic, for example, creating a tornado, so he decided to master unarmed self-defense techniques and thought that a few martial arts moves would not hurt him. Kai showed him a few techniques. Okuda mentally exclaimed that he could not do this and asked to wait. In his soul, he burned with resentment. No one appreciated how he had managed to live to his years. Okuda did not want to die while learning something new, but he realized it seemed he no longer had a choice. The system notified that Okikigo had acquired a new skill, Moonflip, and he sighed heavily, not believing it had worked the first time. Okuda thought that this world was truly unusual. He could not even imagine how much there was to learn here. Okuda convinced himself there was nothing to fear and decided to move on to studying the basics of other elemental magics. He noticed that the wind handled air kites well. He recalled that there were only 6 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness. Previously, he had not thought that light magic could be so useful at night. He became curious about how far he could advance in mastering light magic. He noticed the carcass had already been cut. The butcher boasted that this was the tastiest snake meat. Okuda thanked him and cautiously asked if it was really that tasty, suggesting selling it. You were sure that after learning about the origin of this dish, he would no longer want to eat it. He even jumped up in surprise when he found out that the meat cost a whole 8 gold coins. He took with him the scale, fangs, and poison glands. The butcher said goodbye to him. Okuda replied and thanked him for the help. He realized that there was a crazy demand for scale armor now and decided to sell it to Margot. Okuda came to her home. Sarissa, seeing the scales, exclaimed in surprise. Margot immediately said that she was buying them, but Sarissa objected, saying that it was her thing, and Okuda, thinking they were a married couple, did not understand why a dispute arose between them, so he decided that the scales would be a wedding gift for them. They were on their honeymoon, so he did not want to spoil their vacation and simply gave the scales for free. When he was about to leave, he told them about it, but Sarasa asked him to wait and handed him a bottle. He immediately recognized the same liqueur from the wedding. Although he said it was a gift, it would be impolite to refuse, so he gratefully accepted the bottle and said goodbye, expressing that he would like to meet with you. At home, he thought, this clock is really very cool. Sleep overcame him. He thought that the day had been very eventful. Okuda was surprised that he was so tired. He hugged his puppy Ash tightly and whispered to her that she was a good girl. Okuda happily noticed that the fang of the ash wolf had become a wonderful decoration on his neck and now hopes that it will protect him. He took the dagger in his hands, looked closely at it, and began to think about what might happen to it next. Soon he decided that the best thing was to enchant it with water, and this thought brought a cheerful smile to his face. The realization warmed his heart. He had finally mastered the art of enchantment, although usually Margot did this. At that moment, Juno suddenly called Okuda. He flinched from surprise, admitted that he was scared, and asked what he was doing, and Juno responded with a gesture pointing to something that needed attention. At first, Okuda did not understand, but then he began to decipher the gestures and found out. It was about drinks and a girl that the interlocutor was hinting at. He thought that Juno was calling him to a tavern, a place where one can meet girls or relax. Juno explained he was going home and would return in the evening. Okuda agreed with an uncertain nod, but still thought that what was happening did not at all resemble Juno's behavior. He wondered if something was tormenting his friend again. He clearly did not just want to sit with a glass. Okuda remembered how he himself was not against having a drink after a hard day's work. When evening fell and it got dark, he realized that he could not take the puppy Ash with him, so he left him at Sarasa's. Already in the city, he was convinced that he had done the right thing, and Margot went into the store and the conversation turned to the delivery of daggers. Margot thanked him, said that the store was still open, and invited him to come in. Okuda replied that he would return soon and went on, and Margot only nodded in agreement and did not object. Sarasa was in the shop when Okuda called her by name to get her attention. He noticed that there was no joy on her face and thought that he had probably come at an inopportune moment. As soon as Sarasa saw Ash, her mood immediately improved. She gently called the puppy by name, tenderly hugged him, and was touched by his fluffy coat and good nature. Okuda asked her to look after the dog, explaining that he wanted to spend some time with friends. He thought that perhaps he should have told the truth right away. They were going to the tavern. To explain everything, he waved his hands and showed there would be fun, alcohol, and possibly girls. Okuda noticed a change on Sarasa's face and instantly realized he had made an awkward mistake that she did not like at all. To smooth the situation a bit, he left a coin, called it compensation, and asked once again to take care of the dog. Finally, Okuda caught up with Margot and Juno, sincerely thanked them for waiting, and with slight surprise noticed that they had already started drinking. Margot invited him to join, and Okuda, hesitating a little, still agreed. He suddenly thought maybe at the tavern he could relax and try something new. The place of their meeting was a tavern called the Cradle of the Butterfly. Okuda immediately noticed that the room was arranged very simply without any decorations, and this surprised him. He wondered if people really came here just to eat, because the place strangely resonated with his memories of the past world. He had no idea he would end up here, but since he had come, he decided not to stand aside. He could not believe it. Each of them had his own girlfriend. They smiled and wished him success, and Okuda did not immediately understand what exactly it meant. One of the girls invited him to sit next to her, and he mentally noted that he got a calm and beautiful interlocutor. Okuda greeted her and happily said he was glad to meet her. The girl replied that it was already evening outside. Suddenly he noticed that it had been dark around for a long time and felt a slight excitement because speaking was difficult. Okuda suggested to the girl to correspond by letters. She nodded and, taking paper, wrote her name Urina. He offered her a treat to show his attention. Urina thanked him for his politeness. Okuda, I somewhat felt as if I were that accountant from the academy who caught foreign words on the fly during overseas business trips. But now everything turned out to be much more complicated than just learning a language. Okuda began to wonder whether Margot and Juno had brought him here so that he would better learn the local language. In his heart, he hoped for something completely different, and he was curious about how their evening was going. Okuda turned back to Margot and saw something absolutely unexpected and strange that instantly touched him from within. Mentally, he noted, if Sarasa found out about this, he would definitely tear Margot to pieces, but then he decided that it was her personal matter. Okuda again returned to the conversation with Urena, pondering what else they could talk about. An interesting and unusual topic came to his mind, but suddenly his attention was distracted by music. He heard a bard singing and immediately became interested in what the song was about. Meanwhile, Okuda continued communicating with Yorna using paper and pins, and to understand what she was writing, he used his evaluation skill, which allowed him to decipher the writing. Suddenly he grasped the essence of this song. On a distant mountain in the west, a large tree has been growing for 10,000 years, and in its roots hides a flower that glows with gold, brighter than the sun. Its name is Urian. This sacred tree is zealously guarded by mighty divine creatures, because according to an ancient legend, the nectar of its flower can cure any disease. If you mix this herb with several rare ingredients, a true elixir can be born from it. For this you will need arena herb, the healing plant melon, and a hair of a divine beast. Okuda smiled, all this fascinated and taught him. He sincerely thanked Urena for such a vivid story and mentally convinced himself that his guess was correct. Girls and bars really teach foreign languages wonderfully. He felt that his friend was not lying about this place. When the meeting ended, the girls said goodbye and invited them to come again. Margot confidently promised that they would definitely return. Okuda also thought that he wanted to come back here to continue the conversation with Yarina, and when they left the tavern, Margot asked if Okuda liked it, and he gladly replied that the evening was wonderful. He thought that everything happened exactly as Margot and Juno had planned. They were worried about him, he hardly communicated with women, and Okuda understood that if it weren't for the initiative of his friends, he would never have dared to come to such a place. He was convinced the meeting with Yurino happened only thanks to the tireless efforts of Margot and Juno. Okuda kindly approached a puppy named Ash, surprised by her appearance, and at first did not even understand how she ended up here. Suddenly Sarasa and Elsa appeared before him. He realized that everything had changed and said he was going home to sleep. But suddenly Sarasa grabbed him and Margot and pulled both of them home, not even letting them utter a single word, and Okuda mentally apologized to his friends because he believed that he was partly to blame for what happened. His heart tightened. He did not think he had acted wrongly, but the feeling of guilt still did not leave him. He quietly reminded himself that he had the right to remain silent. Margot and Juno bowed to Sarasa, and Elsa whether out of respect or remorse. Okuda felt that the situation was slowly calming down. Suddenly the puppy Ash turned around and began sniffing something. Okuda asked him what he was doing. The puppy snuck his nose into Margot's pocket and pulled out some object. It turned out that this object belonged to one of the girls in the tavern, and Sarasa noticed this and suspiciously asked where it came from. Suddenly Okuda was overwhelmed by strong anxiety, and he thought that this was the end, as if right now he would have to answer for everything that had happened. But suddenly Sarasa said, "I can leave." Without hesitation, Okuda took the chance to slip away. Without consequences, he said goodbye and apologized. He thought the most important thing now is to get home as quickly as possible, because here, on this battlefield, there is no longer any point in staying. Okuda was standing on the roof fixing the house when suddenly he smelled a pleasant aroma. Since then he could not stop thinking about her and realized that maybe it was love. If so, it will pass quickly. He is never in a romantic mood for long. He finished all the work and noticed it was already late, and the tavern had just opened. Although he wanted to, he convinced himself that he had nothing to do with her, but still he desperately wanted to drink something tasty. The tavern had many different drinks he would try, and it was also long overdue to learn the language. Still, he decided to go to the tavern, although his heart said it would only bring trouble. Eventually, he went in and even bought souvenirs that the girl really liked. She smiled and added that this snack is just perfect with drinks, and since then Okuda started visiting her more often. He really enjoyed spending time with her. Even when he felt good, sometimes reality sharply reminded him of itself. He does not boast, but many women liked him at work, although he did not let anyone into his heart. He saw that he hurt those who became close to him, and it hurt so much that he began to hate himself, so now he can no longer act thoughtlessly in relationships. He wondered if Irina guessed about his feelings. She gives herself to everything. Even a simple conversation can have coffee with him and make him happy. He would never leave her because she truly listens to his words. He is interested in this city and the whole world, and she in hearing his thoughts. Maybe this is her way of enchanting men, but he sees that she really enjoys spending time with him. He could not take his eyes off her. She shone like a star, and he desperately wanted to learn more about her. He constantly repeated that he wanted to get to know her better, learn all her secrets, and in exchange reveal his own. She agreed, and Okuda did not expect that time with her would turn out to be so pleasant. Returning home, he thanked the man for taking care of Ash, added that he was glad everything was going well with Juno, to which the man smiled and offered to light a fire. It seemed that autumn was already shaking off the last leaves, and soon such a frosty winter would come that icy silver dust would shimmer in the air, so Okuda had to prepare for the severe cold. He said goodbye to Juno and the man, returned home and got to work thinking about what his gift would be like. He sat down and began to write in the book everything he had seen today. He was sure that Jorna would be happy. She is so curious and might even add her recipes there, although that is not the main thing. At the end, he signed that the book is dedicated to Jorna from Kegu Okuda, and although he understood that the girl might think he had no taste at all because of the homemade gift, he still decided to see what would come of it. He lit the stove. The hut was instantly filled with warmth, and there was no need to worry about winter anymore. Time passed. The boy came to Urina and brought her a book. The girl was quite confused by such a gift, and the boy was also surprised. He too received a book from her. And also a whole set of winter clothes, as they wear here he urgently needed to change, and Okuda assured him that these clothes were very warm. Yorna enthusiastically said that he looked wonderful in them, then asked to look at the book right now, just started reading and immediately understood that the book was incredible, and at that moment, Okuda felt that all his efforts were not in vain. The book captivated the girl so much that she read it without taking her eyes off. Then she offered Okuda to read it and handed him a grimoire, The Basics of Survival and Ice Magic. Explaining what was written, she stood very close, so the boy tried to concentrate on the text. There he learned to conjure ice and proudly added it to the drink. The boy was glowing with joy he succeeded. He mastered a new frosty skill. Then he realized that he could acquire skills from books. Now he finally understood how Urena creates ice in the form of stones, so he decided to try this magic himself. As with other spells, the result depended on how much strength and time you spent, even if you acted according to the book. He added ice to Urena's glass. She thanked him and suggested reading the book together, and Okuda was glad because he really liked the book and was pleased that it was noticed. It seemed that he hardly spent any time with her, but with Urena the hours flew by unnoticed. Everything was simple and calm. Later he returned to Juno, thanked the guys who took care of his pet, and went home again. Night had already covered everything, and he lay down on the bed because he imagined that it was precisely because of the boss's words that he was running away from people allegedly. Being late is the same sin as murder, because when you are late, you steal people's time, and therefore a part of their life. In reflecting, he realized that he himself was not always attentive to others, so it turns out he also took life from them. But in this world he felt nothing like that. When he communicated with Juno, Margot, Sarasa, and Elsa, they perhaps slowed him down a bit, but probably that was what true friendship was about. After that, his thoughts returned to Arena. He lingered in thought and suddenly realized that it was not about taking someone's life, but about sharing his own with others. Maybe that is his purpose. He had just said something very romantic, but he himself did not understand what was happening to him. The more he thought about the girl, the more he felt as if he was entering a tangled labyrinth. If asked whether he liked her or, on the contrary, was annoyed by her, he would answer that he liked her. He just could not understand why love was so confusing. While he was pondering, he suddenly found himself in the city and did not quite understand how it happened. Actually, he came here to buy winter clothes, although the real cold had not yet come, but being in the city, he decided to give Urena another gift. It was a water dagger. The girl quietly asked if he was really sure that he wanted to give it to her, and promised to take care of this thing. But suddenly, someone's voices began to interfere. Okuda decided that next time he should take some weapon with him. He did not dare to ask the girl for such a thing, but he was tormented by the question whether other visitors gave her something. His soul was heavy, and he trained during the day because he still felt weak, but promised himself to train even more to become stronger. He noticed that his favorite was scratching the wall and decided to check what was there. If a monster was hiding behind the wall, he could aim from above, and indeed, behind the wall was a monster bear, but not at all like usual, so Okuda immediately assessed it. It turned out to be a red grizzly bear, a rare autumn species with red fur. If this was a creature of the fire element, water should work well against it, so he began loading the crossbow with arrows and aiming. He fired. The bullet hit, but he never understood if he killed it. He saw nothing because the grizzly suddenly lit up with a blinding light, and it turned out that at that moment the animal came very close, so at the last moment, Okuda managed to shoot it in the head. His level jumped, and now he could prepare food from this bear for himself. It was extremely tasty. For the first time he tasted such fresh bear meat. It turned out to be softer than ordinary bears on Earth. He also made a potion with an egg and could not resist trying it, and after a sip from the bottle, he felt his body become lighter. The healing potion of Idru restored even lost body parts. It was the strongest restorative tincture Okuda had, but he did not want to drink it at all. Learning what it was made of, he decided to ask Sarasu to sew a blanket from bear skin and began preparing to go to the city. He took a small bottle with him, brought Sarasa the skin, and asked her to take care of it, but he came to the city for another reason. He needed to visit one house, and when he approached it, he was very nervous. He stood near Mr. Bowerin's house. Tony's guard recognized him. Okuda said he came to the owner, and they led him to him. They entered the master's office. Kegu was asked to look out the window, and there he saw the master himself, who sat as if he had plenty of free time, as if already retired. Tony told the boy he would meet him right after the walk, and the boy immediately took out the bottle of potion for healing body parts, also known as Guru Potion, and wondered if it would work at all. Bayron entered the office and, together with the guard, froze in amazement. The elixir really existed. Tony offered to drink it on the spot, but Kigo felt that this drink was too valuable to drink just like that, and at the same time understood. If he hid the elixir, he would be tormented by nightmares. Byron instantly felt his strength returning. Keigo was right. The master's hand really had healed, so thanks to this potion he would no longer feel defenseless, and it was better not to tell him what it was made of. Keigo finished all the chores in the house and was already about to go home, but Byron stopped him and snapped his fingers. It would be rude to refuse a gift, so it was better to accept it with joy. In this world, one has to survive somehow. Money is also needed. There are no markets here, and people still do not understand what he means. Meanwhile, winter was already near, and Keigo thought that many encounters with monsters lay ahead, which saddened him a little. He scratched Ash, who was also afraid of the cold, and decided instead of worrying to wait for the snowfall, play snowballs, and then dress up as Santa and give something to Yuren. In this world, Christmas was hardly celebrated, and if it was, then only with family. The boy really wanted to find out if his blanket was ready, so he went to the store, picked up his blanket, and told the girl to keep the change. Actually, it was Keigo's money. He never liked counting change, it was a hassle for him, and he didn't want to explain, so he just took the money and went home, where the stove was already warm, wrapped himself in the blanket, and felt pleasant warmth. Now he was sure he would survive this winter. He was playing with Ash when suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was Juno and Elsa. It seemed they had come to him alone for the first time, and the boy still had some bear meat left, so he decided to treat the girls. Everyone really liked it. If Keigo remembered correctly, Elsa did not drink, so he poured her juice, and for himself and Juno he took a drink, because he thought it was hard to resist drinking when working in a tavern, and suddenly the guys simultaneously turned to Keigo, as if both wanted to say something to him. So he decided to speak first and directly ask the boy if he was dating Yurina. Keigo thought the guys came exactly for this question. Everything was complicated, so we just dodged the answer and asked ourselves what they were even talking about. Everyone understood him and asked no more questions. Time dragged on. The guys had already started to leave. He hadn't gone to the tavern last night, but everything was fine after all. Going there was not mandatory. He decided to tidy up the house a bit during the snowfall. You can't get water, but you can melt the accumulated ice and fill the bathtub much faster this way. There was enough water and supplies, so today he could calmly take a bath, and this was exactly what the man did. Romance in movies and in life are completely different things. To be happy together, you have to try every day, and for example, Keigo spent the whole day installing the bathtub and going over everything that had happened in his head, and a new cool day had already come. The boy who worked at the construction site told how the boss kept pressuring. You are not married, yet you must make compromises, but doesn't that just mean sacrificing yourself for others? He stubbornly said he had the right to decide for himself how to live. Surviving is much more important than romantic relationships. Love is complicated, and the world is teeming with monsters. Suddenly it occurred to him, if the dragon attacks again, will he be able to protect Yurina? Even protecting himself is already difficult. Surely she needs someone stronger than him. He gave Margot a dagger. He signed several documents and left again. And on the way he couldn't help but wonder, why is he so confused and doesn't know what to do next? When he did nothing, he felt completely ordinary and wanted to distance himself from everyone again. If you think about it, his only entertainments were bathing, eating, fishing, and writing. There was neither internet nor games here. At that time, without social networks and internet, people could only communicate in person. But when everything started to develop and the possibility to connect with people from all over the world appeared, it turned out quite the opposite. He used to communicate differently. You could exchange a few words and the conversation ended. It was easier to protect the heart from others' feelings. But as soon as the topic of love comes up, the soul becomes heavy, because most heartache is born from love, so people often choose a path where they don't have to suffer. After all, it all started with our ancestors. When the heart was beating on the edge of strength, it is then that a person truly feels their love. Because of this, birth rates are also falling. People simply find it hard to marry, and Keigo thought so much about Yurin that he believes. His heart is already on the edge, and further the mind begins to resist. He loved her, but in his head he was constantly arguing with himself. This habit stuck to him, and only alone did he realize that he should already feel better. When he looked into his own soul, the truth struck him. There was no person in the world unhappier than him. Meanwhile, in the tavern the guys were laughing and drinking cheerfully, when suddenly Yurina rushed away. Apparently, she has some trouble. Kazuo was sitting in nature and fishing. In the reflection of the water, he saw himself and thought he looked like a corpse, and as always, got confused. He didn't know what to do. He is a true white crow in this world, different from others in every way. He hoped that a change of scenery would help him. He himself did not understand how he ended up by the river and then returned back. It was sad. But as long as he is alive, he must eat and continue with his affairs. He prepared fish. Its roe could be salted and then chilled together with ice cream. He knew how to make a cod appetizer. In his shed there were chilies, and if they were pickled together with the roe, it would create a new interesting flavor. But when he went outside, he saw Ash barking at the fence. He saw the girls open the fence. They ran inside, and the boy, with a frightened voice, asked what had happened. Ash thought that monsters were probably chasing them, and not wanting to get involved in trouble, decisively closed the fence behind him and said it would be better to go inside the house. The girls thanked him for the help, but Keigo stood confused and could not understand what was going on. The girls began to undress, but the boy stood up and sternly remarked that it was not appropriate to relax like that in the house of a stranger, asking them to put their coats back on. Suddenly Ash fell silent. The boy became interested if there were monster tracks outside and said he would go check, and the girls with trembling hands offered him to stay overnight with them. He felt their fatigue from constant fleeing, but still extended a helping hand. They refused, and he said that the bed he was about to show was for guests, led them to the room, lit the stove, and left them alone. Why they stayed alone in the city, he could not understand, but explained to himself that they had their reasons and did not blame them. It was already dark outside. In the morning, he would ask them to leave, but for now he decided to go scout the situation himself. Having made sure everything was in order, he returned home, drank something, and decided to rest a little because he was not feeling very well. He fell asleep but suddenly woke up from a bright light that unexpectedly appeared in the room. It was the girls who entered his room and climbed onto the bed. He asked them to stop and leave, but they did not listen, so he had to climb onto the table. Kigo was about to run outside, but suddenly a man ran into the house and loudly declared that these girls were his. Kigo froze in confusion and did not understand what was happening, and the man immediately asked where the potion had gone. Kigo could not understand how he knew about the partial effect potion, and if it was the same potion that healed the right hand of that nobleman, then it seemed someone had blabbed. The man rushed at Kigo, but he set the man's hair on fire and mercilessly drove him out of the house, and Kigo thought that this man might have been sent by Heinrich. The man fled and Kigo froze in place, trying to decide what to do next. He looked at the girls and suddenly felt he himself did not understand what was going on here. He really did not know when it would be right to let the girls out into the cold. Behind the fence, he noticed a cart with Margot. The boy did not expect to run into them right here at all. The boys were wildly worried about Kaga and told him everything that had happened, so finally everything became clear. It turned out that the girls had been drugged. Urena talked to the beauty salon workers and found out that the former Mohawk was kicked out of the red light district. He hired 3 beauties, whom he himself chose in this area, to attack Kino and kidnap him. Urena learned about this plan thanks to her connections in the entertainment district, informed Margot and the others, and they immediately went to the scene. The girls were sent to sleep in the blacksmith's hut. Margot approached Keigo and quietly whispered that Urena was very worried about him, so they decided to throw a party. Keigo wanted to invite the 3 kidnappers, but they got embarrassed and refused. There was little food, but it was already late, so they had to make do with what they had. He thanked the boys for waiting, smiled, and said that today's menu had a new dish, cheese with cod roe. The boys were delighted and surprised, said it was very tasty. And also, when they all ate together, it was extremely pleasant. Urin started pouring drinks for everyone, and Kigo asked her to talk outside. They went out together, and after that incident, he somehow stopped coming into her shop without explaining anything. It was very cold outside, and the girl immediately shivered. Keigo was surprised that she ran after him in such light clothing, so he apologized to her, threw a fur coat over her shoulders, and they looked at the sky together. Snow began, white flakes quietly fell from the sky. Now Urena shone like a real angel in snow-white wings and smiled broadly. Keigo apologized for not coming into her shop, but frankly admitted he needed to say what he wanted. He had to express his feelings before Urena disappeared along with that light snow, and the girl quietly asked why he was lost in thought. Kato dared to say that he could not stop thinking about her and confessed his love, and the girl whispered in response that she loved him too. They looked into the distance with relief. The boy shook the snow off the girl. She asked in surprise what had happened. Tears appeared in his eyes, and Kigo thought that he had not even noticed how he started crying. At that moment, it seemed to him that the strong desire in his heart would melt away with the snow. If Urena got into trouble, he would be the first to rush to her aid. When she was sad, he desperately wanted to be near. He told her that everything was fine, and the tears appeared by themselves. On that magical night, when the wings of angels seemed to be swirling in the air, he was ready to become both a shield and a sword for her. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, Ash jumped out. It turned out that the guys were reviewing their confessions, and everyone immediately felt incredibly awkward. But in a moment, everyone began to congratulate Kigo and Urena. The young lovers looked at each other lovingly, then cheerfully talked with the guys about their feelings for Urena, and later everyone drank quite a lot. Who would have thought that this night would turn out to be so fun and happy, and everything would turn out just like that? Everyone together lay down to sleep right on the floor. The boy decided that morning was coming soon, and he needed to cook rice porridge for everyone. Except for Yorna, she sobered up quickly, but he suffered so much from the hangover that he lay powerless for another 2 days. In the morning, everyone was already hurriedly getting ready to leave. Everyone had their own affairs. The boy said goodbye to Keigo and gave Yorna a blanket. He learned a few words in the local language. Yorna also memorized a few Japanese words, and both were a little happy about it. Everyone agreed to meet later and said goodbye. Keigo was left alone, but he started sneezing, and Ash gently calmed him down, saying everything was fine. It was already time to go home. Only a few hours had passed since everyone dispersed, and Keigo already terribly missed Urena. He did not want to be alone. He felt deep loneliness, so he quickly packed his things and ran out onto the street. I set off on the road and, walking, wondered if Urena still worked at that place. He was sure she was already used to drunk men, and just imagining it made him angry. He understood that she was free to do whatever she wanted, and interfering would mean limiting her freedom. He knew it was not a very good idea. But now emotions broke out of control. He understood that it was not worth acting impulsively, but he could do nothing with himself and still came to the tavern. Margot and the others were already asleep because it was midnight. He did not want to wake them, so he decided not to ring. He approached the tavern door himself, and he was very ashamed. He had traveled a long way and now stood almost at the goal. He was so nervous that he did not even notice how nervous he was. If there was ever a moment in his life to act, it was now. He opened the door and went inside. He immediately noticed Yorna. Everyone was looking at her with admiration, and the boy instantly took her aside so no one would bother her. He asked her not to be afraid. The girl felt that he was worried about her and thanked him, but the visitors were not happy at all about his appearance, because he suddenly started barking, and all the girls, touched, gathered around him. They took turns touching him and said that he was their little fluffy client. Kigo realized, animals are truly loved here. Ash was popular everywhere he went, like a real mascot of this place. Yurina showed Kigo where they would sit and began pouring drinks. Suddenly a woman approached them. She always seemed to him to be the boss here, and he immediately felt a sense of danger, so it was better not to argue. He was even glad when she just greeted them, because he was afraid she would get angry that he came with a dog. Bandits broke into the building, noticed Yurina, and immediately approached her. Kigo felt it was better not to get involved with them, but they themselves headed toward him. One of the men started pointing to his head and saying something in the local language. The boy immediately recognized that this was the same guy with the mohawk whom he had set on fire. He felt sorry for him because of the hair, but Yurina was working here, so everything had to be resolved peacefully to avoid causing her even more problems. He had almost nothing left because he had given most to the nobleman. He took a bottle of potion from his pocket and offered the boy to drink it, not even sure if the potion would help restore the hair, but the boy drank it anyway. The mohawk grew back again, and Kigo felt like he had seen this somewhere before the hair became even longer than it was. Everyone was happy for this man. He had hair again. The young man thought that now he could finally relax and calmly drink with Yurina, but suddenly the man grabbed Yurina's hand and said their conversation was not over yet. The boy jumped up and set his hair on fire again with a fiery sword. The woman hit him in the stomach. He fell to the ground, and Kiko thanked the woman. He anxiously asked Yurina if she was okay. He did not even suspect that she was also in danger and that it had become dangerous to work here. He said they would leave together, addressed the woman manager, and explained that he was taking Yurina away, silently begging her to let them go because now was not the time for arguments, especially since the hostess looked even scarier than those bandits. Keigo took out a pouch with 300 gold coins and gave it to Yurina. To him, she was worth more than any money. The girl also asked the master to let her go. She really did not want to do this, but she still agreed. The woman hugged Yurina tightly and whispered thanks to her, promising to distract the bandits while the boys ran away, and that's exactly what happened. The bandits rushed to grab Yurina, but she decisively fought them off and defended herself. It didn't last long. Yurina and Keigo couldn't run far. They turned into an alley and ran even further. They pressed against a barrel, hiding from danger. Keigo immediately began looking for a way to protect the girl. He instantly froze the puddle. Mana was almost gone, so it needed to be urgently restored. He cast wind on the girl. Her skirt flew up, and the bandits immediately noticed it. They instantly rushed to her, but slipped and fell on the slippery ice. The boy made sure they were alive, but as soon as he wanted to lift the skirt frame, Yurina grabbed him and warned, "Don't you dare do that." He quickly apologized, and they all headed to his cart. He heard that the bandits were detained and felt relief. Now nothing threatened them. Besides, he took their weapons with him. They approached the gate. The guards smiled and greeted them, but the boys didn't even stop. They drove on. Then they kissed, and that very evening the wind died down. The snow stopped falling, as if nature itself welcomed them with this moment. On the quiet road where only the sound of wheels was heard, the girl wrote a letter to the boy. She wrote that if it became hard for him to be with her, if together it was hard to endure the pain, he could leave. She of course would be sad and even cry, but still wanted to be with him because she loved him very much. Yorna knew that Kigos wanted to be alone and did not like people, but she still accepted him as he was. She even devised an escape route for him in advance because he could not imagine that someone could be so kind to him. He felt like a stranger in this world and often thought, what if one day he wakes up and finds himself in Japan? If tomorrow he is suddenly separated from Yorna and Esh, his heart will break from pain. He cannot allow Yorna to find out about this because he simply cannot imagine his life without her. Thus began his life with Yurena. He dreamed that they would grow old together, and when they became grandfather and grandmother, he would tell her every day how much he loved her, because he was sure despite all difficulties, everything would be fine for them. After some time, Yarina heard a knock on the door. Margot and Juno appeared on the doorstep, whom she had not seen for a long time. It turned out that she had left her things with them, and Kiko immediately asked how the mother from Yarina's previous workplace was doing. They carried all the things into the house. Yuna was talking with the girl. Meanwhile, Margot thanked Kagi for the cheese, and Code Ro said that if you think about it, they ran out of ingredients, so they need to go fishing. The boy decided to go fishing and asked Mark to look after the house. Mark agreed. He kissed Yora right in front of the boys, and they gladly watched it. Keigo blushed and went to the river. He lacked the warmth of Ash, so he longed to finish as quickly as possible and return home. But near the very edge of the road, he noticed something strange. It was full of holes, and upon closer inspection, he realized that these holes were left by thorns. Suddenly, they rushed at him from behind, but the shield took the barrage of spikes. It was a new type of monster for him, and the boy did not expect it at all, instantly using his evaluation skill, revealing that before him was a giant echinoderm very similar to a sea urchin. Perhaps they started killing more servants, and because of this the ecosystem is collapsing. That's why this filth appeared in the river. The man pulled out the thunder sword, covered his horse, and charged forward, but hiding behind a stone, he noticed that the spikes grow at equal intervals of time, and when he shoots needs a few seconds to reload. While reloading, he suddenly jumped forward, and hit first. He succeeded. He dealt with that hedgehog. The level increased, and while the water was cold, the boy decided to dismantle the monster. Then he used the assessment, but his analysis was only superficial. It seemed that everything was going well. The man ate a piece of a hedgehog. Even the purple sea urchin, which grew on the best seaweed, was not as tasty as this one, and its size was somewhat frightening. He quickly ran to the cart and put the catch there. The boy shouted with joy, wanting to take the urchin home as soon as possible before new monsters appeared. He returned home, and the boys gaped in surprise when they saw his catch. If you think about it, they had never tried anything like sashimi before and had never even eaten such strange creatures, so he immediately began to prepare the catch. First, he placed the sea urchin in salt water on the table. He sincerely hoped that everyone would like the taste. The boys tried it with apprehension. Kagu at first could not understand why they had such a reaction. But the boys quickly spoke in delight. It was really tasty, simply incredible, and now Kigo moved on to the main dish. He said that to get the texture of the sea urchin, the dish needed to be mixed with an egg, and here was a ready tender omelet with cheese and sea urchin. His heart warmed from the fact that his friends liked his food. After lunch, everyone asked for seconds, and when everyone went to rest, Kiko decided to go to the bathroom. It was long past time for him to rest. In winter, the best thing was to swim outdoors. You enter the water, and it immediately becomes warm, with a clear sky and beautiful stars overhead. The feeling when the frozen body gradually relaxes was simply incomparable. Someone knocked on his door. The boy thought it was Margot and asked if the food was really finished. But it was Urina. The boy froze with fear when he saw her naked. He asked what happened, and she swam closer to him in the water. They sat back to back, and Kiko thought, women in this world are very stubborn. She turned to him. The girl stood up and asked him to look at her body. The boy was embarrassed. He was a man and did not dare, so he jumped out of the water and ran into the house. Suddenly he realized that Yuna was to blame for everything. Called her a pervert. She began to apologize confusedly, and the displeased Urina also entered the house. She got angry. The boy left her alone. Kigo approached her, said he loved her very much, and began to apologize. He noticed the mocking looks of Margot and Juno and could not understand why they behaved that way, since they were the ones at fault. The night came. The boys went to sleep, and Kajo remained sitting at the table writing something. In real life, he was almost a recluse, but only for Urina, the girl he loved and valued very much. Now he has someone he must protect, and this time it's for real, and that's the most important thing. He can no longer pretend to be a lone wolf. But the problem still exists. Aristocrat Heinrich, who is setting bandits against them, has taken a liking to this house, and if because of his position the place becomes dangerous, that's another matter. They have a lot of money, the chickens are fine, so they can leave. But the boy drove away these thoughts and decided to stay. He was not alone, and tomorrow, when he wakes up, he will talk to his friends. That day he finally told everyone the whole truth, that he healed Master Byron's right hand with a potion, that there was an attack on Urina, and that most likely the robbers were hired by Byron's son Heinrich. Their conclusion turned out to be exactly the same as his last night. If the aristocrats in power take this seriously, he will most likely be caught before he manages to do anything. He and Urina must leave this house and go away by carriage. Margot gave Keigo a map. A map of the surroundings of the kingdom of Lancaster. It was not needed before, but now it will be useful for quick orientation. The boy thanked the man. Urina told Keigo that she had never traveled before. She could no longer wait for adventures. Margot supported her and said that such a journey is a real adventure and a fun event. Without a doubt, he will go to overthrow that Heinrich and then come back for him. But for now, they can relax and enjoy the trip with Urina. They will sort out the rest later. Kigo thanked Margot and said that since everything is decided, they can pack their things. The chickens will be given to the farmer who knew Sarasa. Margot will go with Juno, she occasionally catches monsters. Elsa will go with them, and Kigo, although he did not want to cause extra trouble, had to make sure everyone said goodbye. While he was fussing with the things, the boy wrote a letter to his best friends and asked them to read it alone. Another important matter pressed. He had to set off on the road with Jairna, so he had to act. The flower gave it to her, but the girl never understood. He promised he would love her all his life and always protect her from any danger. He froze, doubting whether he said everything correctly, but he knew no words would be enough to describe her beauty. She, with tears in her eyes, replied that she would love him all her life, because for her he was the sun that shines every day. He uttered the oath that Sarasa taught him, a sign of a happy marriage, and before fleeing, he gave her a special flower, a symbol of their wedding just for the two of them. Ashbark suddenly realized Keigo is a true priest. Suddenly, a strange courage ignited in the boy's heart. He reminded the boys once again that he left them letters, and now he was setting off on the road. Saying goodbye was not easy. They could no longer stay here, only worse lay ahead. Kigo did not believe they would ever return here. Margot said he intended to overthrow the nobility, but Kigo doubted whether that was even possible. He sincerely hoped that the boys would take care of themselves and finally become happy, and he would protect Urina. Wolves ran alongside them, and Urina was glad about it. Someone asked what Margot gave her, and the girl replied that it was a means of self-defense, a slingshot. If you add some special feature to the stone, it can become a real weapon. It seemed Heinrich collected them because she received the slingshot from him. Kigo was almost certain that Heinrich was hunting him, and he never thought he would regret his decisions. That potion was not supposed to appear in public. Now everything hung by a thread, so Kigo decided. It was better to set off on a journey where he wouldn't have to think about it, and he treated it as an opportunity. After all, they were going to Tirana. The unfamiliar night roads were frightening. It was dangerous to travel, even when wolves helped. They could not relax, so they decided to stop and rest a little. Sometimes Kigo felt as if it were a honeymoon. Their wedding ride on horseback under the starry sky was incredibly romantic, but the place where they stopped was so open that everyone could see them. The cart had no roof, but Kigo had 3,000 gold coins, so he could buy a covered cart with them. He wondered if other boys were looking at the moon now and fell asleep next to Urina. The next day, suddenly birds flew out from behind the trees, and Kigo immediately became alert. He heard a strange sound that turned out to be a cockatrice monster. Yorna wanted to cover him, but the boy objected. It was too risky. She needed to move away. He realized that he was no longer alone and they could survive together. The monster had not noticed them yet, but just in case, he decided to assess the situation, and new information appeared. Keigo cast his spell, summoned wolves, and ordered them to attack the cockatrice and eat it. Now the monster could not even move. It was firmly restrained. Next time he shot a poisoned arrow to be sure to kill it, and indeed it worked. Now it remained only to finish off the monster. His summoned creature had already rushed at the monster, and the cockatrice was about to release its poisonous breath. The boy called to the blue wolf to retreat. The wolf did not have time to do anything. Keigo felt that things were bad, but Yorna came to help. They rushed at the monster together. Suddenly Kiko's level increased, but he had no time for that. He poured a detoxification potion directly into the wolf's mouth. He sincerely thought it would help, but nothing came of it. They dug a grave for him, and Keigo buried him himself. He thanked him for protecting them and wanting to be with them until the very end. He did not feel weak at all. On the contrary, strength boiled within him, as if it were a festive return of a hero. Henry was furious at the bandits' reports. They had already failed the job twice, and the boys had escaped. He thundered what was going on, did not want apologies. He needed results. Then they explained that, according to the hired mafioso Johnny and his gang, 7 devils, some man named Kigo was extremely dangerous. If that happened, they would capture Kigo and Yorina, tie them up and bring them to him. They would sit at Henry's feet, and he, laughing in response, advised not to pay attention to it, but to focus on the main business. The man rang the bell. A servant came. He was told to call the captain to the office. He also added that the captain should gather about 50 people and assured the master that he could be relied upon. Henry thought that since Jill would be there in person, Kigo was unlikely to stay alive today. If they took his girlfriend hostage, he would have nothing left but to brew a potion to restore body parts. Moreover, he had already arranged with the Church Inquisition for a special torture chamber. He would make these guys regret everything, and they should no longer count on a good life. But as with the dagger, someone would rise anyway. They had completely seized the city council. They even managed to win over the very influential guild master of adventurers, Schulag, to their side, and now Heinrich felt as if he was no longer a toy in his father's hands. Executing or imprisoning them would be risky. The reputation would suffer, so he decided at least to expel his father's henchmen from Leicester, and then house arrest would solve the issue. Hans decided that, for starters, Donnie and others could drive his father's assistants out of the city. That day, Keigo sent a letter to each of the boys. He sternly warned that reading others' letters was strictly forbidden. In the letter to Margan, he confessed maybe it was a bit strange, but he was writing to him specifically, informed that he planned to overthrow Henry, but hoped Margan would not take it too seriously. With urine, everything would be fine, and if problems arose, they would just flee in the opposite direction. When he first found himself in this world, Margot gave him weapons and armor for free, and he was infinitely grateful to her. Without this help, monsters would have killed him long ago. Since then, he visited Margot at every opportunity, and although it was a bit annoying, it was also pleasing, because he knew that he himself was sometimes withdrawn. He appreciated that Margot was always nearby and tried to support him, and although he said nothing, he felt. This was what helped him survive. The man asked Margot to look after everyone in Leicester, especially the adventurers. Their lives depended on the dragon's anvil. He sincerely wished happiness to her and Sarasa, asked that Sarasa and Elsa not find out about his worries about returning to Leicester, because he did not like to talk much, so he left everything as it was and hoped Margot would understand him, and crumpling the letter, quietly wished Keigo to take care of himself. And there was also a postcard to John, in which Keigo admitted that he was uncomfortable talking about it in person. He told Margot that he felt as if he would never return to Leicester. That was why he wrote to John. Keigo believed he owed him. They had defeated the basilisks together, and he himself would never have managed. It was difficult, but when everything succeeded, he felt great. When he fell in love with Sars, he felt so exhausted and depressed that he did not know what to do next, but meeting Elsa filled him with sincere joy. Now he was going to head north, to the city of Tarrant, and then plan to travel further and protect Irina until she was safe. Man must take care of the woman he loves, and he understood this well. He apologized and honestly admitted that he would gladly stay with them forever, but circumstances did not allow it, so he asked to take care of everyone and of Leicester, and assured that there was nothing to worry about with Irina. He would definitely be happy. And finally, in farewell, he asked not to get involved in unnecessary adventures, and not to bring Elsa to tears. On the contrary, to make her happy, asked not to tell Sarasa and Elsa that he might not return, because they would definitely start discussing it. His little house in the forest would come in handy for them. Let them use it. He could live with Elsa, left the key with Sarasa and said goodbye to him. John said he would definitely help, and wished luck in the first big adventure. Keigo also wrote to Sarasa. Maybe she was worried that he would not be able to return to Leicester, but he promised that he would definitely return, and that Ash, whom she cared for so much, would miss her. When he first came here, she made a deal with him for her own sake, and it was she who, when he did not yet understand what was good and what was bad, kindly introduced him to the Adventurers Guild. Without her, he would have long since not survived. He also told her that the raw sea urchin he ate yesterday turned out to be an egg from a water monster's nest. He wanted to treat Juno and Elsa with it, but probably soon that would not be possible. These eggs lie in the river he usually goes to, so she can ask Margot and Juno to bring them to her. Their weakness is lightning, and he also asked to warn about the thorns. They attack the enemy every 3 seconds, so he wrote so much that it was hard to retell everything, so he leaves it without abbreviations. Eliza was always kind to him, so he would definitely return to Leicester to find out how she was doing. She can come into his little house whenever she wants, together with June. He does not mind if they stay there to live. June constantly drags him into adventures, and he would be grateful if Eliza looked after her and did not worry too much. Eliza always cared about Ash, and it hurts him to think that now they will not meet for a long time. But that is how fate has turned out. The girl showed Juno the letter, and he quietly said that he understood what she had written. Kagu wished them happiness, but did not intend to say goodbye. Juno told Elizabeth that he would sometimes help with cleaning and spend time with her. But Margot was very unhappy. She called Keigo a misanthrope who did not even want to live in Leicester. He did not understand how he would live without their support. The man was in despair, believed that Keigo should be free. He rushed to write a letter to Master Baron and all acquaintances, because there was only one goal in his mind: to defeat Henry and save his friends. But Ash whispered in his own language that the valuable name was given to him by the Master. He sees the color of the creature's soul, because a stain appears from its body. The Master and Yarina Todrith, their soul shines brightly like a flame. Now that Master and Yarina are together again, his soul shines even brighter than before. He was sad to say goodbye to Sarah and Elsaith. Memories of time with them still warm his heart, but now he enjoys fun adventures with Uncle Blue Wolf. Uncle Blue Wolf taught him many things, showed which way to go and where the villages are, and also told about the village of Vovkiv. There grows a giant sacred tree over 10,000 years old, and when a wolf dies, its soul merges with this tree, and it becomes a heroic spirit. That is why wolves are so brave. They can stand against the strongest enemies. A new leader needs to grow gradually and not rush, but next time he should learn to speak well. The wolf was very kind, sometimes strict, and always courageous. A cockatrice still killed him, and together with his uncle's friends, they sang a requiem for Wolverine. His soul rose to the sky, shone with warm light, and returned to the body, and the wolves said that Master Kagego was very strong, even defeated Ash's mother, their mentor. Yes knew about it only superficially. He barely remembered his mother, just a vague image, and the fact that she attacked the master, and he defeated her, and that was all. Ash was an ordinary wolf. Like all others for him, the laws of the jungle were the norm. The master and uncle also fought for life, for their own safety, and if someone loses to a stronger one, they simply die. Everything is clear here, so Ash did not intend to consider the master an enemy of his mother. He's not only strong but also kind, with a very good soul, so he will continue to fight for his mother and uncle. Watching Ash from the tree, he will also fight for the master, and the wolves see that the little one has become stronger and understand that they have done everything they could for him. After the boys moved away from the place where they buried the blue wolf, they continued on to Tirana, and after some time finally arrived Yarina, warned that traveling performers often come to this big city, so they needed to be careful and not leave any traces. The girl looked tired, and it was not surprising at all. They had already spent several nights in the wagon, and now they had reached one end of the road. It was still unclear how much farther they had to go, so he decided to let her rest a little. He paid the boy to watch their belongings and buy the necessary small items, and the boy promised that everything would be ready by morning. Their apartment had a kitchen and a shower, and the room was very cozy. The boy said that today they would have a good rest, but suddenly the girl approached him and said that she did not want him to run away today. Time passed, and in the morning the boy, as promised, brought everything they ordered, even a cart with a roof, and also bought a good horse, and he was paid for this work. Kago named the horse Queen May, and the boy said with admiration that it was a very beautiful name. Then the young man asked him to help carry the things, and the boy smiled and jokingly asked how many silver coins he would get for that. Urena went outside and handed him a sheet of paper. On it was written that she wanted to see the city. They were only in a neighboring town, and Kiko was already preparing to leave as far as possible, but Urena wanted to at least look around a little. The man smiled and replied that of course, since they were in the city they would take a walk, and indeed they went for a walk. They came to the circus and had a great time. After the walk, they checked out of the hotel. They would have gladly walked around the city some more, but probably they should not stay here long. And Kiko's premonition did not fail him. They could not even imagine that danger was very close. When Henry learned from a nobleman under the tyrant where Kago was hiding, he was overwhelmed with disappointment. He did not manage to catch him. He immediately called the Juru Corps to pursue, but the yard where they usually stopped was already empty. At the same time, accusing Kago of a crime, Henry ordered to post wanted notices all over the city. But even after that, Kago was not caught. Reaching him turned out to be not so easy. He even thought about announcing a large reward for him, but what joy would there be if he died? If Henry stood out too much, other noble people would notice his abilities, and this tincture was supposed to belong only to him, so he had to act secretly, and then force Henry to obey. He would order urine to be tortured right before his eyes. He sternly ordered the guards to bring him a horse and find a new woman. He was going to show this man what humiliation was. Johnny was a street hooligan. He grew up in poor neighborhoods and had a fierce enemy. His life was not without injuries either, but thanks to his tools, he found time for entertainment. Eventually, he became the owner of a luxurious mohawk, and every time he is praised, Johnny simply glows with happiness. One day they received an order from an old man with a white beard. He behaved strangely, but as soon as they started executing his plan, everything went smoothly. First seduction, then kidnapping. Nothing worked out for Hatch. Everything went awry. They failed, even lost their weapons, and in the end, Johnny also managed to lose his favorite mohawk. Next came the story about Urena. She worked in a small but cozy tavern. Although the establishment was small, for her it was family, and every visitor carried their own past, and Urena was no exception. She had an older brother named Sato, and their childhood was full of pain, burns, cuts, threats, violence, and insults. Because of this, when the girl was 7, her mother ended her life. But one day, when their father was not looking, the kids broke free and ran away. They began living on their own in the slums. The brother always gave the sister the larger share of food, enduring hunger himself. But there is a limit to everything. One day, he became so weak from illness that he lost consciousness. Unfortunately, he did not last long. After he fainted, he died, and for her the whole world lost its meaning. Sitting on the roadside, the girl awaited death, but someone unexpectedly reached out a hand to her. Large hands easily lifted her up while she tried to say something. She still remembers how much warmth and kindness they had. They gently enveloped her like wings. The owner, Josephine, took her in, not just sheltered her, fed her, gave her a clean bed, and helped her recover from what she had experienced. And when her sight gradually returned and her voice appeared, the girl cried and hugged her savior. Then she began helping around the house and later working in the tavern. Everyone here had their own duties. No one questioned her. They accepted her very warmly, and over time life became calmer, and her emotional wound gradually healed. Sometimes her mother taught her how to defend herself. Earlier, she did not understand why it was necessary, but now everything became clear. Children are often kidnapped, sold, and turned into toys for the rich, and her mother had already saved her twice from such misfortune. Having come to her brother's grave, the girl shared with him news about her new life and work, and it seemed to her that her brother was moved, and then she learned that her father had already passed away. In the tavern, she met the very man with whom she wanted to tie her life. It was Kagu. He sat and thought about what Yorina once said. She likes the red blackberry flowers that grow right by the roadside. They are nothing fancy, but very resilient, and that is why she values them. This story reminded him how the girl shared her past with him, and if she was able to open up to him, then she trusts him. The boy thought that she believed that he did not notice this, but since they started living together, the girl blossomed, became less shy, and more often showed her tattoos. What surprised him was not the number of drawings on her body. This seemed like a usual fashion here, but how easily Urina undressed. For the first time in his life, his heart knew true love for another person. He was sure that he would never again meet such a wonderful girl as Urina. One day they were attacked by a giant sea urchin, but the boys, acting together, quickly and easily defeated it. Then they cooked dinner together, divided the duties between themselves, and lived peacefully together. Together they joyfully prepared delicious food. Then they went to bed. Sometimes Urina fell asleep not on the bed, and Kagu gently laid her in bed. He could have gone to sleep himself, but he knew it was no longer the same, because now there was another person nearby. When he first came to her workplace, she was different among everyone, outwardly calm, but in reality avoiding men, and tattoos hid her emotional wounds. Despite all the difficulties, she could still smile and be happy, because there were wonderful people around. All the girls in that place have their own story, but they get along well with each other, because they were saved by one mother. When friends asked Irin if she would be lonely, she smiled and replied that on the contrary she was glad to go on a journey, because this place was a real home for her, and someday he would like to bring her back here, and he was also sure. If she were perfect, he would never have fallen so deeply in love with her. She did everything to survive in harsh and lonely conditions. Perhaps it was this endurance that touched Jorbara, and because of this he fell in love with her, so he decided to apologize and sincerely tell about his feelings in a letter. And when the girl wakes up tomorrow, he will show her how madly he loves her. The next morning the girl looked offended, but the boy greeted her with good morning, and the offense immediately disappeared. It turned out that he forgot to confess his love to her yesterday, so she was upset, and he handed her a letter and asked her to read it. She reread his letter again and again, and also flipped through the picture book he gave her, even though they were together. It felt as if he was writing a letter to a girl from another country, and they confessed their love to each other again, and KGO fell in love with her anew every time, every day.